Why, hello there. To receive each episode of Sacred Symbols 3 days earlier than the public, totally ad-free. To have your questions, comments, and concerns read on the air. To hear your name in the end credits, and to score other cool perks. Please consider supporting this show on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Not only will your subscription net you benefits for Sacred Symbols and allow this show to continue into the future, but those benefits also carry over to other CLS shows too, including the video game-centric YouTube show SideQuest, the retro and nostalgia-themed podcast Knockback, and the eclectic interview series Fireside Chats. In other words, you're getting insane bang for your buck. Again, that's patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. Thank you for your kindness, generosity, and support. Without you, Sacred Symbols and CLS couldn't and wouldn't exist. Now, on to the show. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast. This is episode 7. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by Chris Raygun.
Hey.
How are you today?
I'm doing pretty good.
Chris, we're recording on a Sunday today. We usually record on Mondays and publish on Tuesdays. We're recording on a Sunday and we'll publish on Tuesday because you're heading back home to the tri-state.
Yeah. Heading back to New York. And I scheduled the flight for the wrong day because I'm a genius.
Yeah, you're doing like a red eye. So you presumably thought it was tomorrow night.
Yeah. I got all mixed up. I like flying red eyes though, because I get to just like sleep and wake up and I got the rest of the day.
So you can sleep on a plane?
Yeah. Just take a Benadryl.
Really? Yeah, I can't. I guess I never really tried to drug myself, but I could do that.
It's the only way.
But I am chronically unable to sleep on planes, except when I went to Philadelphia and back a couple months ago to record some stuff with my brother. I'm like an MVP, Alaska MVP or whatever, because I fly a ton, and they bumped me in the first class, both there and back.
Oh my God.
And so I totally slept because I actually wasn't, in a sardine can. But I've gone to Japan and Europe and all these places and been up for 14 hours and just totally I want to jump out of the plane.
No, I couldn't do that.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's terrible. Well, you're going home to record content?
Yeah, I'm going home to just see family. I haven't seen them in a while, and it's a good opportunity to just kind of record content because I have a lot more freedom there because I have a car over there, and I have my parents' house is very, very open. They've got like a lot of acreage. They got like 4 acres of land, so it's like there's a lot I can do there.
That's exciting. And
it's fun.
And you just put up a video that I watched, I think today or yesterday.
Right.
So you guys can go check that out. A new what do you call it? Glasses off.
It's glasses off. Yeah. It's just kind of like I think it's more like your style, where it's just like just here's what I'm thinking about this particular thing that's going on.
Perfect. I like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not into heavy production, as you guys can tell if you ever watch my videos. But we're here. We're letting you know simply that we're recording on Sunday, just because often things break on Monday, and this podcast just by way of us recording it won't have that information until next week. So we apologize about that.
Right.
But there's nothing we can do about it. And this is a rare Sunday where I can record because once football season starts, Sundays are sacred territory for me and the Jets. So before I get into anything, we have some details to go into, and we obviously have a lot of news. We have new games that are coming out, lots of listener questions. We keep calling them reader questions, but no one's reading the transcript of the podcast.
I think it sounds better than
I
listener.
do too. Let's just stick with reader questions
with it.
then. By the way, if you want to submit questions, you can do so if you're a patron of Colin's Last Stand on patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. The $2 level or higher a month, I will put up a little thread on Fridays. You guys can submit your questions. A lot of you do. And then I grab from there. And I try to be as judicious as possible in grabbing the questions and trying to spread it around, but I obviously can't use them all. And if you support the show, or Patreon rather, at $5 or up a month, you get ad-free early access 3 days early of every episode before it goes live to the public. And a lot of you guys are signing up there as well. So again, patreon.com/ColinsLastStand if you're interested. Really do appreciate that, no matter who you are. And as we've been saying, if you listen on the free feeds, or even if you don't listen on the free feeds, reviews on iTunes, Google Play, and stuff are really helping us. Our podcast is still in the top 10 on iTunes. It is still the #1 PlayStation podcast in the world, according to iTunes.
My God.
All thanks to you guys. And as I'll show Chris afterwards, the numbers are increasing. And this past week, between episodes, I guess 5 and 6, I think it's 5 and 6, the numbers having jumped significantly. People are finding our show, Chris.
That's awesome.
And they're really enjoying it, I think. Well, they're finding it. I can't speak to if they're enjoying it.
1 out of 2 ain't bad.
Mark Elfring wrote into us on Patreon, and he has a Fuck, Marry, Kill Part 2.
Oh, God.
And it's spiders, gnats, and extreme neck pain. Now, these are the things, of course, that have been taunting us for the last 2 weeks of our lives. Me with the spiders and the extreme neck pain, and you with the gnats. So, before we get into anything, Mr. Raygun, fuck, marry, kill. Spiders, gnats, and extreme neck pain.
Well, I've killed the gnats already. The gnats are all gone. They've been eradicated. So I guess I feel like the other two are completely interchangeable.
Yeah,
I don't care. I'll take neck pain again.
It's a tough one.
It's been a while. I might miss it.
I want to just say kill, kill, kill.
Kill.
I guess I
would. Can't kill your neck.
Would you marry a spider? Because you'd feel it would be very scary, but you'd feel protected from other things.
A spider's a pretty good partner, I think. They're the most cooperative of the insectoids.
Sure. I respect that. This is too tough for me, Mark Elfring. I don't know that I can answer this question, but I do appreciate if you want to send in another one in a few weeks and make it a little more. Don't specify things that I want to kill. Just kill. That I understand that you want to make it difficult, but this is too difficult. I'm gonna fuck neck pain. That doesn't even make any sense, Mark. I'm gonna marry neck pain.
No, neck pain fucks you.
42420. Interesting name. Wrote into us as well. So the New York Giants play the New York Jets on August 24th for a preseason showdown. I'll bet a $20 PSN code on the New York Giants. What do you say? I say I don't bet on preseason football because it's completely meaningless and everyone's just throwing players out there to see what they can do. So I appreciate your offer, but I'm gonna decline the yearly Jets Giants preseason game, which I think is the Snoopy Bowl. I think that's what they call it because it's played at MetLife. But nonetheless, you keep your money, I'll keep my money. And maybe if the Giants and the Jets play in the regular season, which they only do every 4 years, we can reconvene and approach this again. I think it might be next year that they play, but I could be wrong about that.
It's like listening to an alien converse.
You're not a sports fan.
I don't know anything about it.
In the AFC and the NFC, the two conferences in the NFL, teams in those conferences only play each other once every 4 years.
Right.
So that's it.
Okay.
That's all you need to know about what I was just saying. I was a little disappointed in you because on Twitter you noted something that I wanted to keep secret. I felt like it was something that only you and I should know about, because you were wondering, and our friend Bunty was wondering online, well, why am I so hated and maligned in games in the games media? And this actually has to do with something we're going to talk about in a little while, but you let them in on a secret that I was surprised you let them in on, which is that we do a baby sacrifice. We sacrifice a human baby before every episode.
Yeah, it's a good luck charm, and as you can see by the numbers, it's worked.
You're absolutely right. And so we did something a little bit different today where I let you came in and we didn't sacrifice the baby because I thought, we would do it on the air. So I'm going to call in my goon who's going to bring in this baby. Bring me the baby. And we're just I'm going to say a little prayer at the altar and done. So now you get a little insight into what we do here on Sacred Symbols.
I was not let in on that. That completely took me by surprise.
And Chris, finally, you tweeted out something that I wanted to talk about at the very top, and we actually have questions about it, or questions in relation to it. You had mentioned something about Spider-Man, Insomniac Spider-Man, which comes out in September, and we're really excited to play it. Should be talking to them this week. We might be getting copies somewhat imminently.
Oh, awesome.
And you had mentioned that the advertising for or basically like just the promotion of the game is becoming too much. I was curious if you can go into that a little bit, and then we'll talk a little bit about Spider-Man at the top before we get into the news.
Right.
So what are your feelings? Are you seeing too much on YouTube? Are you seeing too much on television?
I don't know. I just feel like I've seen a lot of this game for a long time, and I was already sold on it from like the moment I saw it. Like an Insomniac Spider-Man game, having been familiar with Insomniac for a while, having played Sunset Overdrive, unlike a lot of people didn't play that one. I had pretty good confidence in them to build this game. So like the second I heard about it, I was like, okay, I'm good. I'm sold. Give it to me. But then I kept seeing gameplay for it, and I'm like, okay, I get it. And especially with their E3 focus, which I thought was weird because I thought Days Gone might have been a better thing to put as one of their... They did like 4 big games, right? 4 of their main games, 20-minute chunks of gameplay or whatever. I felt like Days Gone could have used a little bit of that, and Spider-Man had plenty already. They had like a whole Game Informer month where they went in detail about I don't know, I just feel like I've seen a lot of it. I'm not any less excited about it. I'm just kind of like, there are things that I've seen like spoiled in thumbnails that I'm like, I didn't know. I had no idea that the first fight was going to be with the Kingpin. I figured that would happen before or like whatever, but it's like, all right, well.
Thomas Conley wrote in us and said, hey, Colin and Chris, what does a game like Spider-Man stand to lose from being overmarketed? I saw Chris's tweet about it, and I would love to know his take on why showing too much of a game could hurt it in the long run. Do developers do this because they know fans have an insatiable appetite to see more of the game? Personally, I've dodged the flood of story content that's on YouTube right now. I have no idea why people would want to ruin the first few story missions for themselves, especially if they're just going to play the game in a month. Thanks, guys, and have a solid week. So you talked a little bit about it, Chris, about your own kind of preferences, but do you think that in a broader sense, that over-marketing it, overexposing it, oversaturating it in a pre-release format is bad for the game inherently, and you wonder why Insomniac is doing this, because Sony and their publishing or their developer partners, whoever they might be, don't typically do this. In fact, they often do quite the opposite, whether it's with Naughty Dog games, whether it's with, Sucker Punch games, whatever. You don't usually see as much of it. So do you have any thoughts on that? Do you think that it's inherently bad for the product?
I don't think it's necessarily inherently bad for the product. I think Spider-Man is a unique thing in the sense that it would usually bug me a lot more if it was like something else. I think it's kind of forgivable just because it is a Marvel property, and Marvel's enormous right now, and I think that's probably why you're seeing a lot more of it than you would see for like Uncharted or Last of Us, is because it's this big secondary property. I don't even necessarily think it hurts it. It's just more like my preference. Like I kind of miss being surprised by things. I miss just kind of like looking at a game in like Game Informer and like, oh hey, I wonder what that's gonna be. That looks cool, and then playing it, and then like I'm surprised by like every couple levels. Where it's like, okay. My main concern is that they've shown so many things that I would have liked to see in the game that I wonder if there's anything left in the game, and I'm sure there is. But like they showed the Sinister Six off at E3, and I was like, why would you do that? That would have been awesome to find out during gameplay.
It does kind of beg the question about how big is the game, and to your point, if they're showing so much of it, are they showing everything, or could it be that they're so confident there's such a density of content in the game that they're able to show it and we'll be pleasantly surprised on the other side? Unfortunately, I think that it's not the latter. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think that they're probably interested in pushing this game because it costs a lot of money to make, and they have to sell a lot of copies of it. And so I think
they will.
They're absolutely going to. It's going to, I think, destroy some other games. Actually, I saw a news story that I didn't write up about Square Enix talking about how they're not worried about Tomb Raider getting cannibalized by Spider-Man. I think their line was that only one of the games has Lara Croft, and in my mind, I was like, only one of the games have Spider-Man.
Yeah. That's not the best response.
It isn't at all. Corey Christensen wrote into us too about this topic and said, "Hey, Colin and Chris, great work on this podcast. Thank you,
man.
This question is for Colin. From my time following you at Kind of Funny, you were never overly interested in Marvel Comics. What changed with this Spider-Man game? Nothing's changed. I don't care about Marvel Comics. I like Insomniac games. As you guys know, they're one of my favorite developers, and I super take an interest in whether I end up playing it or not. I take interest in all first-party PlayStation games. And Spider-Man, actually, as I've talked about in the past, I'm a huge Batman fan on the DC side. Otherwise, I think that shit's corny as hell. Like Aquaman. Listen, I was talking to my brother about this. If you have Jason Momoa in Aquaman and it still looks stupid and corny, it's not going to work for you, right? And obviously Wonder Woman, I think, is just strange. And a lot of the Marvel stuff, from my perspective, is just strange. I'm not into the whole mutants fighting in space thing or whatever.
Right.
But Spider-Man is rooted in New York, where we're from. And I've always been kind of a fan of that story. I always felt like it was a little more relatable. And so there's that. But that aside, even if this was an X-Men game, or certainly when Crystal Dynamics finally shows off its Avengers game or whatever, I'm going to be interested in it from a gameplay perspective. If the game is good, then who cares about the subject matter? I think that I'd be a little hypocritical to ignore a game based solely on the subject matter if the game is good. And Insomniac makes good games.
And it's also worth mentioning that Spider-Man in particular has a pretty rich history with really good video games. Like Spider-Man 2 is one of the benchmark movie licensed games of all time. It's like one of the best of that kind.
Sure. There's also, what is that? There's their Spider-Man game, Shattered Dimensions. Which I kind of dug. It was very weird.
It was very similar to the PS1 game back when Neversoft was making it. It was very, very like, your web's stuck up to the clouds. It was very arena based. They were pretty good games. Web of Shadows was great. I don't hear anybody talking about that though, which is
Well, I think we have a great game on our hands.
Yeah.
And the preview, as we mentioned last week, we weren't able to preview it because of a scheduling snafu, basically. But lots of previews out there are speaking very highly of it. And we'll see. I mean, we'll have impressions, I assume, in the coming weeks. And we have to kind of decide, Chris, and we'll decide it privately, I guess, although everyone's input is welcome. Should we be doing separate podcasts for big game releases? My fear about doing that is that we're then going to be tethered into doing that over and over again. We're going to have to rely on doing that, as opposed to just shoehorning it into an episode of the show. But then I don't think we're going to be able to spend as much time as we want to. If maybe doing it 4 or 6 times a year, like a podcast.
I think we could do it for the big releases.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be a problem. They're pretty spread out.
Yeah.
Except for early next year, which is kind of...
Yeah, February 22nd.
Yeah.
I think, or February 19th, one of those dates, big day. Yeah, anyway, give us feedback on that. We'll be happy to hear from you and let us know what you think, if we should be doing. So, for instance, the week the Spider-Man embargo goes up, should we do a Spider-Man episode and a regular episode of the show, or just a regular episode of the show with Spider-Man information in it? By the way, I'm wearing my pajamas. I'm in my shorts. Are you Does it do anything for you looking at me in this way, like my legs?
No.
No? All right. Well, I just want to make sure. I was just curious. I mean, it's just curious. It just
you're
came
fine.
to mind. All right.
You're fine. Fear not, Colin.
All I do is fear. That's like all I ever do is I'm just worried and I'm always fearing.
All I do is fear.
Now, corrections and notes, we usually do this. There's only one note that I want to make this week, which is last week we were talking about Metro Exodus and the Studio 4A games that made them. And I was telling you guys that when the previous Metro game, Last Light, came out, I saw it at E3, I think in 2013 or 2014. This was when Russia was invading the Ukraine and obviously took Crimea and annexed it as if it was the 19th century, and we still do those kinds of things. And I noted that 4A Games representatives had told me that they were making the game basically with the Civil War in the backdrop, which was really interesting. I was reading more about it, and during and after the invasion, because they were afraid they were going to lose everything in Russia, they actually moved a lot of their studio to Malta. And there's still a presence for 4A Games in Kiev in Ukraine, but they're not solely there anymore. And so I thought I'd throw it out there just in case you guys were curious.
Right.
In terms of what we're playing, neither of us are playing anything.
Yeah. I've been busy trying to get stuff out before I flew across the country.
And you just downloaded Dead Cells on your Switch, so you're going to be playing that, I assume.
Yeah, I'm playing that on the plane.
Etc. etc. I've been messing around with Chasm on Vita at night, but my brother Dagan was just here. As you guys might know or may not know, I do a retro-themed podcast with my brother Dagan, and it's about all sorts of different things, not only old games, but like we did one on the video store, we did one on the early internet, etc. And it's called Knockback, which you can support on Patreon, same Patreon that you get the support for this show. So you guys, if you support Colin's Last Stand on Patreon for this show, you just get all the perks for Knockback and the other shows for free. But anyway, Dagan was here for 4 days. We recorded 9 episodes of the show.
My God.
I think they were between 90 minutes and almost 3 hours long each. And we have exciting content coming. So my entire week was totally fucked because of that. But next week, I'll be getting into Guacamelee 2, finally trying to finish that. I'll probably be reviewing that. And Dragon Quest 11 copies are going out, so I hope to get that in the coming week as well. Now, let's get into the news.
Alrighty.
The first piece of news is that we finally saw Red Dead Redemption 2 gameplay, and we'll just discuss it. There's nothing else to really say there. Saulius Vecteris wrote into us and said, "Hello, Colin and Chris. Love your show. Keep making Tuesdays great again." We will. By the way, how do you feel about Make Tuesday Great Again? Is it growing on you?
Yeah, it is.
Okay, good. My question, are you excited for Red Dead Redemption 2? They showed new gameplay footage and it looks very promising. And Paul Turton says, "I know it's an obvious one, but thoughts on the Red Dead 2 gameplay trailer would be cool."
Right.
Were you able to watch it? And if so, what did you think?
I was, and wow, that is a beautiful looking game. I almost don't believe it when I'm looking at it. Because those animations are so slick and it just looks... I don't even know, man. It's hard to get a feel for how a game like that plays. You know, it's difficult to envision the input in a game like that, but I'm stoked for it. Like, I had no real hype for it. I was interested in it, but I hadn't played the original Red Dead, and this might actually be the thing that gets me to play it.
So here's my thing about this. It actually goes into what you were talking about with Spider-Man. When games are shown in detail, I typically don't watch the trailer. I don't watch the footage at all. Like, I'll look at a screenshot or a little snippet of it or a GIF or whatever, but I don't go and jump in. But for the sake of this show, I did that. I went and watched the entire thing, and it was only 6 minutes long. Mm-hmm. And while I was puzzled by the female narration over it, which was...
it was very odd. It had like a very spunky attitude to it that felt really weird.
It didn't feel quite irreverent like I thought it would in terms of... It seemed very structured, like they're being very careful and very calculated with what they're showing, which I totally understand. I was drawn in by the game's aesthetic. I think it's beautiful. The mud and the water looked really cool. The snow looked really cool. Now, I think that they're talking it up in a way that doesn't really impress me. Like, the camp is here, and this is your protagonist. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't care about any of this.
I don't care about any of that. Yeah. I'm just looking at, like, how it looks and how I'm expecting it to play, which is probably pretty good. And it's kind of like building in Fallout 4. It's like, hey, you can build a base. And it's like, that's cool. I don't care about that at all.
Right.
Because I'm not playing Minecraft or any of it. I'm playing a Fallout game. I want to be in a wasteland.
Yeah, they're wedging like everything possible into these games.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't care about that. I'm just like, but I'm psyched. It looks so good.
Will you play the game solo or you play the game with friends, do you think? Or a little bit of both?
Red Dead?
Yeah.
Probably solo. A game like that's probably, at least the first time. If I choose to play it again, maybe I'll do that. That seems like a single player game to me.
To be perfectly honest, it's not even on my list of like my most anticipated games. It's just not. I'm obviously going to play it and probably get immersed in it, probably really enjoy it. But I'm also mindful that when Grand Theft Auto 5 came out, I was in Japan. I had a copy waiting for me that I bought on Amazon when I got home in 2013. And I played it for like a day. And then I'm like, this isn't scratching an itch for me. And I fear since this is literally the next Rockstar game in sequence 5 years later, that I just don't know that. I'm honestly way more excited about Mega Man 11, way more excited about Dragon Quest 11, way more excited, about Doom, which we're going to talk about in a minute, and other games. I don't want to rain on anyone's parade. I am sure it's going to be fantastic, and as we said last week, I'm sure it's going to sell great, but the gameplay, like watching the footage was cool, and it was beautiful, and it's exciting that people are excited. I'm super stoked that people are stoked. I think that's great, but I won't have this feeling of excitement until I'm probably playing it myself.
Right. Well, they're very careful with how they market it too. They definitely don't overmarket their games, I think. Which works to their benefit, because that means I'm like a lot more interested in it than I would otherwise be.
Sure.
If I just constantly saw trailers for it,
Yeah, we'll draw the dichotomy, for instance, from what you were just talking about with Spider-Man. I think there's something exciting and there's like a big dick energy with Rockstar in terms of like they just take their time and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
They have these really nebulous sort of conference calls with their investors, with Take-Two, where they're like, talking about how well the games are going to sell, but that the team's working on it. They keep things really silent. I'm also really impressed that they don't leak anything, or they leak very little there too. There's probably a little bit of a culture of fear or reprisal there, because everyone would want to work there, so people are probably easily replaceable. But I'm much more interested in their tenor and in their approach to making games, and that there seems to be no timeliness to it, nothing attached to it. They worked on this game forever, and obviously are still putting the finishing touches on it. So very exciting that it's out there. Super excited people are excited. But I'm way more interested about the next game that I want to talk about. And I think you are as well.
Absolutely.
Doom Eternal footage was shown at QuakeCon, and we got some letters in about that as well. Travis Thompson says, Doom, that is all. And Nate McKinney says, hey, Colin and Chris, loving the show. Hot damn, how fucking awesome does Doom Eternal look? That gameplay video blew me away. The action seems even faster, more frantic, and more brutal than the last game. There's even a grapple line thing for Chris. And Chris put up a funny little video of him and his reaction to that when he was Twitch streaming it. What were your guys' thoughts and impressions? Colin, I remember you liking 2016 Doom a lot. What's your excitement level for the new one? Chris, did you play the last Doom? He did, of course. If so, what did you think of it? Have a great day, and thanks for making Tuesdays great again. So this is all you, Chris. I want to hear what you think about Doom Eternal.
I'm so screechingly excited. I was so happy to see. Well, first of all, I loved the hell out of Doom 2016. It was a big surprise to me, because when that game was initially coming out and I heard about it and I saw like gameplay trailers for it, I was like, this might be fine. And then the beta came out and it was like kind of crap. And I was like, this is probably going to be okay. Whatever. And then I played it and I couldn't put it. It was like my game of the year that year, without a doubt. I loved the hell out of that game. And the fact that there's more emphasis on movement here. They did everything that a sequel to a game like this needs to do. There's more demons. There's more guns. There's more movement options. There's more verticality. It's quicker. It's beautiful. I'm so excited. This just jumped to the top of every list for like anticipation for me.
They showed quite a bit of it too. I think a lot of it was obviously kind of flanked by on-screen presenters and guys on stage at QuakeCon kind of rallying.
It was a sizable chunk of gameplay that they showed.
Yeah, they showed it. It looked like it was running beautifully. The fidelity of hell is wonderful. It looks really cool. I have no problem with violence in games, and the overt violence and over-the-top violence of Doom just makes sense. There's just something about making it as bloody and as gory as possible that just makes that game work, and it's been that way since 1993, 1994. So that's nothing new, but that's what I've taken away, is that they're just doubling and tripling and quadrupling down on the very essence of Doom, and it's exciting.
Right. No, it's beautiful looking, and as I've said countless times before, you put a grappling hook in anything, I'll buy it. They did it as they should, and I freaked out. I was so happy to see. So happy.
You love grappling hooks.
That's why I'm excited for Spider-Man. That game's entirely just grappling hooks.
Do you like hook shots as well, or does that not count?
I do, which is why I was kind of disappointed with Breath of the Wild, because there was no hook shot. Why is there no hook shot in a Zelda game? Excuse me?
Yeah, that's weird. Well, Breath of the Wild is just a weird game. I don't want to go down that road. I think that there's a lot to be excited about. Doom Eternal is obviously not until next year, but I appreciate Bethesda's reliance and dedication to just single-player first-person shooters. It's just, they're the only ones doing it. They're doing it with Rage 2, which we're going to talk about in a little while. They're doing it with Doom. They're doing it with Wolfenstein. Obviously, there'll be a third Wolfenstein game in this new Machine Games trilogy, or in the Machine Games series. So they're obviously seeing great metrics. And obviously there's going to be a multiplayer functionality, and obviously they do their multiplayer stuff with Quake Champions and all that kind of stuff as well. So it's not just relegated to the single-player sphere, but that's what makes me excited about them, is that they're dedicated to this at the same time that they're taking a single-player game like Fallout from Bethesda Game Studios and making it multiplayer. Yeah. They're willing, whether it works or not, whether people are happy or not, they're experimenting and doing different things and doing kind of wild things when you compare them to the safety of EA or the relative safety of Ubisoft.
No, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when Doom 2016 was announced, right? Did you expect anything from that game?
No.
Right?
No, especially because
I had no expectations for it.
Yeah.
It blew me away. And this time I had expectations for it, and they still blew me away. I'm so happy.
I'm happy for you, too.
Yeah.
I'm very excited for you. This seemed like I was excited. I thought about you when I was watching it because I knew you were probably very excited. But I don't know. There's something so silly about Doom, rather.
Yeah.
Inherently, and something so strange. And
just makes you smile.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's weird that would make you smile, but it does. Because there's nothing else like it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Very exciting. The big story, other than those 2 game reveals that we kind of briefly discussed, was this situation at IGN. And I wanted to discuss this. Now, before I get into it, a few things that you guys should know is that, A, I worked at IGN and I worked there for 12 years. And so I have a bias towards them for sure. The second thing is that I did a YouTube video that will be up by the time you're hearing this on SideQuest's YouTube channel, youtube.com/ColinsLastStand SideQuest, with really in-depth thoughts about this. But let's read the question, or let's read what happened. Let's read from the audience. Let's get Chris's take on it as well, and we can discuss from there. IGN has fired its Nintendo editor, Philip Mewson, after he appeared to have plagiarized his review of Dead Cells, the recently released Metroidvania/roguelike from French studio Motion Twin. Allegations of Mewson's plagiarism circulated rapidly after he published his video review, which at times bore striking resemblance to a video review posted by small YouTube channel Boomstick Gaming. Boomstick Gaming released a video comparing the similarities, and IGN pulled the review on Monday evening as it investigated. By Tuesday morning, IGN posted an apology, vowed to re-review the game, which it has since done, and fired Mr. Mewson, who days later made an ill-informed, or I'm sorry, I don't want to call it ill-informed, an ill-conceived video in which he barely acknowledged what happened or overtly apologized for what he did. Kotaku's reporting has since revealed 2 other instances of apparent plagiarism on the part of Mewson while he was still running his Nintendo-centric YouTube channel. In addition to the Dead Cells review, he's now being accused of copying and rewording portions of a FIFA 18 review from Nintendo Life and a Metroid Samus Returns review from Engadget. Mewson has since deleted his apology video and gone silent. We'll get into the questions that you guys submitted, but I want to get Chris's take on this first. I texted you rather about this when it broke, and that was only when Dead Cells was involved, not FIFA and not Samus Returns. What do you make of this? Because in all my experience in this industry, I have never heard of anything like this. I've heard of a lot of conspiracy theories, and I've heard of a lot of things that are true, like Gerstmann Gate back in the day at GameSpot. That's true. That happened with the Kane and Lynch review and the ads, and that's a famous instance of this. But I've never heard of someone wholesale copying another person's opinions.
Yeah.
That was the weirdest part of me, and a big part of my video is that plagiarism is usually in the realm of scholarship or journalism, and it usually has to do with facts or the attribution of them.
Yeah.
That's typically what you hear about. And I go into the case of Doris Kearns Goodwin, who's a famous historian who taught at Harvard and I think still teaches there, who was nailed of plagiarism but apologized and was contrite and everything went through. And then she released Team of Rivals, which is a fucking massive book, and kind of got over the hump. This guy's situation is obviously going very different. But I've never heard of anyone being so seemingly vacant of mind that you need to copy someone else's feelings. What do you think?
Yeah, the thing to me is that it's just so... It's so blatant at times, and I don't know if you've seen Boomstick uploaded like a comparison, like a side by side where he played portions of both, at the same time, and at times it's just essentially verbatim. Like there's no way you can get around the fact that this is obviously plagiarism. And to me, it was like I was talking to Lacey about it because I was talking to her about this, and I said it's almost more believable to me that someone would have the exact same opinion than it is that somebody would be so up their own ass that they wouldn't even think to hide the fact that they're plagiarizing so blatantly. Like it's inconceivable to me that someone would copy word for word a video on the internet, especially when it's about a game that very few people have access to. It confuses me greatly.
It confuses
why
me too.
Anyone would think that they could get away with it.
It seems like he thought he can get away with it because he did. And the crazy thing about it to me, Chris, is there's an extra layer to it. It's not like there is no written version of that review, of Boomstick's review. It's as far as I understand, it's just a video review. I mean, they might have a script somewhere, but I don't think so. So there was this extra kind of nefarious thing about it. Although as a writer, a professional writer, for a long time, there's nothing worse than plagiarizing in our field. It's a cardinal sin, and there's no excusing it regardless of it. Yeah. But to listen to a review and then write down what the guy's saying and copying it is like a whole nother step. It's not like he even copied and pasted it from somewhere and then reworded it. He had to literally listen to this and then was either concurrently writing it himself and rewording it or what. That's the weird, that's just, I don't want to say the weird part. That's another weird element to this.
Yeah.
Is that it's not even like he misattributed something or saw it in a review and just copied it into his own document or whatever. There's like an extra step he had to go through. I don't know. I don't want to bury this guy. Like, I don't feel bad for him, but you kind of inherently don't want to pile on a dude that's probably, it basically destroyed his reputation and destroyed his career and is never going to recover from it. Mm-hmm. But it is worth talking about because the victim of it, and there are multiple victims, the 3 people that he copied at least, but also the audiences for this, and also the outlets that now have to go through and scrub everything he wrote and kind of compare and contrast it, and everything comes into question at that point. And it's a total waste of time. It's a waste of resources. And the people at IGN now have to deal with this for the rest of, or not the rest of their lives, but the rest of the time they're there. This is a thing that's never going to go away. People are going to bring this up constantly, and it feeds into the conspiracy theories that nefarious shit happens at these outlets.
It's like the too much water thing.
Right, exactly.
Like you're never going to see the end of it. I saw it. I think they put up a review of Flipping Death that I watched, and like the comments were just all about who'd you steal this review from? And it's like this is a different person, guys.
Right, exactly.
Like, calm down.
Exactly. So
people should be aware that like you don't pile on people. He didn't kill somebody. He's not like a murderer.
Right.
He did a stupid thing.
He's dishonest, but he's
dishonest.
And that is worthy of ridicule. But that's what I said on Twitter, which was like, we don't need to bury, like IGN made the right decision, but you don't need to bury this dude. Like, what are you gaining by piling on him? I never understood that as the victim of pile-ons for things way less worse than this. I don't want to carry myself or conduct myself like that. The bigger thing that I was interested in, though, was talking to him. And I reached out to him, and he did get back to me, but he didn't want to talk on the record and basically said that he's basically declining my invitation because I invited him and I even offered to fly him to LA to do fireside chats with me.
I saw that.
In which I would have loved to grill him to his face. And I also asked him a bunch of questions for my video, which he declined to answer. What did you think about the reaction to me asking him questions?
Oh, where people were like giving you shit?
The ironic thing, a lot of people in the media were giving me shit, but no one else.
Yeah,
so
of course.
What does that tell you about where games journalism is today? Where they're like, he doesn't deserve a platform. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure Charlie Rose sat with Charles Manson for hours. And I'm also pretty sure that David Frost paid Richard Nixon $600,000 after he was almost thrown out of the presidency to interview him.
People don't have a sense of scale, I think. People don't really understand the scale of these things. And they think like, oh, of course, Colin, the I don't even know, the sexist comedian is interviewing the man who stole children from the White House.
Yeah.
Or something like what do you this is the most benign thing I've ever seen. When I saw that tweet, it was like, hey, he just wants to talk to the guy.
Well, what was disconcerting to me, and I understand, again, as we showed you earlier, we do sacrifice babies on this show and we do other nefarious things, but what I was confused about, and it really did show a lot of people's true colors, and you guys listening out there that are familiar with this know exactly who the people are that showed who they really are and what they really think of journalism and truth and all those kinds of things. You can kind of do the math yourself, but this idea that I would support him, that was the biggest thing. I'm like, I don't know who the fuck this guy is. I've never met him or talked to him in my life. And B, I'm a writer and a professional one. I wouldn't support the cardinal sin of writing. That's bizarre that you would think that. It's so partisan and so silly. And I just love how these people will expose themselves. And I just love how people basically told them where to shove it.
Weren't other people from other outlets asking to talk to him also?
Yeah. My old colleagues at Kind of Funny brought it up on one of their shows, as people brought up. And Jason Schreier, who we just mentioned earlier, basically went at one of these guys online saying, like, why are you, like, what are you talking about? The right of response is like as a primary tenet of journalism, no matter what happened. If a dude murdered someone and you can interview him, you get that response if you have access to him.
Yeah.
And it was so funny watching these clowns backtrack when the most respected journalist in the world in games industry, not in the world, in the games industry, was basically like, you guys are wrong. And he told one of these guys, like, I will talk to him under any circumstances. He can come on my podcast. He can Skype with me. We can talk on the phone. And I'm like, exactly. That's what I was taught to do as a journalist. It goes to show you the complete fracturing games media and in games journalism and how these guys have no interest in getting to the bottom of the story.
Yeah.
And I talked to several people behind the scenes at different outlets. And the thing I said was, if I was editor-in-chief of one of these outlets and I saw any of these fucking clowns that worked for me saying this, we'd have a long discussion on if they belong in my establishment or not. Because I would be like, instead of grilling this guy who you have this partisan hatred for, maybe you should get the fucking story. You know?
Yeah.
Maybe you should be asking him if he'll talk to you.
Games journalism is a weird thing because the majority of people, I feel like, who are in that field aren't really... You have like a few people who actually take it seriously like that, but the majority of people are just kind of people who want to write about games. Really.
Well, they want to write about games and they want to write about and destroy or boost up or whatever people they like or don't like or products they support or friends of theirs. It's totally transparent. And the unfortunate thing about this situation at the outset was this is, like I said earlier, it kind of paints games media and games journalism badly because now people have questions about if this kind of stuff is happening in terms of plagiarism. But the reaction to it has compounded the problem because now people, dude, my tweet responses to people, thousands of favorites, causing massive conversations on Reddit, massive conversations elsewhere about like, what is everyone's problem? It's so funny because a situation that destroyed, a piece of the pie of games media's reputation was just destroyed even more by their own response to it. The games media that I come from, everyone would have been emailing and reaching out to this guy to try to get him to talk. And the person that can get him to talk and the person that can get him to go on the record or do a podcast would have netted huge benefits from doing that.
Right.
Even if he's lying to my face, that's up for you, me and the audience to decide. But I'm perfectly happy to give him enough rope. So
I don't get it, man.
So now you guys know who's doing real games journalism and who's doing the hard work and who isn't. And you guys just saw it play out before your very eyes. You know exactly who the players are that are doing one thing. You know exactly who the players are that are doing the other thing. And you guys spoke loud and clear, and I appreciate that. Because other than, the small group of media and their strange obsessive acolytes, everyone else saw through it. And it kind of deflected from Philip Mewson's kind of responsibility for just in that moment, for just a minute. When it's like, why don't we just ask the dude questions? Very weird. Stephen Summongut wrote into us and said, Philip's response just came out an hour ago. Now, as we mentioned, his response has since been deleted.
Yeah.
Notice the sidestep of the simple yes or no question. What's your take on his response, timing, directness, etc.? What did you make of his response video?
Yeah. I don't know why he denied it. I don't know how you could... It seemed like something that a kid does. Where they're like, where they still believe in like supernatural shit, where it's like, whoa, who ate the cereal? I didn't eat this. It must have been a ghost. Because I'm a child and I can believe that that's possible. But like he pretty much denied that he plagiarized it all, right? That was the gist of.
He basically worded it, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, so this isn't a verbatim quote. No. But what he said was something along the lines of, when I go into these things, whatever I'm criticizing or reviewing, I do a bunch of research and read about it.
Right.
And this was unintentional or whatever. And I was like, okay. So first of all, you're basically admitting that you did look at this guy's review. And that's, I guess, fine. I don't know. I wouldn't do that. In fact, I go, and we'll talk about this in a minute, I go well out of my way to avoid doing that. And any critic I've ever met does that because we're afraid of being painted, our opinions being painted. It's like it's the greatest excitement and also greatest fear when you're at a big outlet is when a big embargo is up and you have been in isolation playing the game and writing it and no one else has played it and except for these certain people at the other outlets. And then 1201 comes and everyone's shit gets published. I remember when I gave The Last of Us a 10, I was like, I'm going to be the only one that gave this game a 10. I know it. I know people are going to think I'm a fanboy and all these kinds of things. And lo and behold, you're like eagerly waiting.
Yeah.
You have no idea. He said I always do this. And I'm like, but that's the exact opposite of what you're taught to do. Like you're supposed to keep yourself in a silo and isolate yourself from other people's opinions as best you can.
Yeah.
Now you could do research on who is the studio? When did this game come out? What was their last game? All that kind of stuff. What did they say in previews?
Yeah, but looking at reviews is a different thing.
That's totally bizarre. That was the first thing that was bizarre. But the second thing was, he didn't discuss what he did. He never came out and said, and I think this could have gone very differently for him. If he just came out and said, listen, I did do this. I'm sorry. It was not my intention, or I did not realize that I was doing it to the extent I was doing it. A lot of this stuff seeped into my subconscious, whatever the case might be. And I really am truly apologetic about it. And I'm going to work to get back your trust. He only said the last part, I'm going to work to get back your trust, but didn't even apologize to Boomstick. And like I said, the stupidest error he made in that video was challenging Jason Schreier to find more dirt. Tempting fate. And Jason Schreier is a well-respected, thorough, investigative journalist. What did Jason find? More. And so that was the weirdest thing where I remember seeing that the first time and I'm like, that was a mistake.
He didn't even need Jason Schreier to find it, because even when he was tweeting about it, when he made his tweet like, "Oh, I'm sorry" or whatever, or not, I don't even think he tweeted about it. I think he just tweeted out the review, and the responses were like, about what was happening. And the first thing I saw was somebody talking about how the very first tweet that was algorithmically placed under his review was something about how he plagiarized something at Nintendo Life. I was like, I'm not a journalist, and I found this thing, and anyone could look that up and find exactly what he's talking about.
Right.
So it's just like, wow, why'd you do that?
He had a Nintendo YouTube channel, and he was the Nintendo editor at IGN. So this doesn't really concern me from a content standpoint, because I don't think he could have stolen anything I've ever done, for instance. But if I were at one of these Nintendo sites or anything like that, I would be very eager to compare and contrast. It also just shows that he was constantly missing embargoes. So it showed that this dude's not only inept, but lazy. And obviously there's an inherent laziness when you're plagiarizing.
Yeah.
And there's an inherent ineptitude to that. But for you to be able to copy shit like this means you're just missing your fucking deadlines too. So what I said in my video is what I'll say here. This dude faked his way to the top, and he was exposed. And he was way out of his depth. Like there's no doubt about it. And on a personal level, do you want to see a guy destroyed like that? No, I don't. I personally don't. But I think that the punishment of firing was certainly fits the crime.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Boomstick was talking about how Boomstick was like really nice about it too. Like, I don't know if you saw his like response. Super nice about it. And he was like, "Oh, I hope he can continue working at IGN." And I'm like, dude, no, he can't keep working at IGN. It was his first video review, and it was plagiarized. You can't have that under your banner as a like. I mean, I get that that's like a nice thing, but you can't realistically expect that.
Well, I talked to Boomstick on the record, and a lot of that's included in my video, but he reiterated a lot of the same stuff, which was, even after all of this happened, he's like, I don't know this guy, and I don't cast a judgment on him. But I reached out and tried to get comment from a lot of people, and I talked to some people off the record, and one person who works there who talked to me off the record, or not off the record, but anonymously, talked to me about how there's a cognitive dissonance here where, how did this person put it? Kind of like this person lives on another planet and absolutely believes their reality. Like, he doesn't know he's lying or doesn't accept that he's lying, even though the evidence is so overt. And it makes it, from a personal standpoint, even harder to pile on a dude like that when it's like, you see this upset dude on a video and he doesn't seem to understand the gravity of it. And you don't know if he's being duplicitous to the nth degree, or if he's just maybe stupid, or if he's just, I don't want to be meaner to this guy than a lot of people. There's nothing I can say about this guy that other people haven't already said. And I don't want to pile on, like I said earlier, but there's just so many angles to this.
Well, if I could quote George Costanza.
Please do.
It's only a lie if you believe it. Oh, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not a lie if
it's not a lie if you believe it.
Right, it's not a lie if you believe it. Fair enough.
Always
It's the exact opposite of what you said, but right.
Yeah, I know. Fuck.
Says Migu Peter, and again, I don't know if I'm saying your name right. Says, hey, Colin and Chris, I wanted to have your take on the IGN editor who plagiarized his Dead Cells review, and I have 2 questions about this. The first is, why do so many people feel the need to send hate towards the guy? He was bombarded with hate messages on Twitter ever since. The guy lost his job, deservingly so in my opinion, in our opinion too. Isn't that enough? And the second is more for you, Colin. Could you take us through your process of reviewing games back in the IGN days? We'll go into that first, but I'm curious before we do that, Chris, how do you feel about seeing a guy like this, even a guy who did and is lying and did a lot of stuff wrong and probably more to come? How do you feel about witnessing the personal, professional, permanent destruction of someone? It's very rare where I ever am like, yeah, you deserve that. No matter how bad it is, unless it's literally murder or rape or something like that, am I going to be like, yeah, bury this dude? I don't think what he did was right. I don't think anyone should be supporting him. I don't think he belongs within a 100-mile radius of the gaming industry. But I don't want to see him poor and destitute on the street or something like that. That's just not who I am.
Yeah. I think the punishment should fit the crime. I think, or at least should be proportional. The guy copied a review. 2 or 3, right? But at the end of the day, it's this is like copying homework. He's not a kingpin. He's not done anything to me that would be deserving of months and months and months of just constant scorn, which I guess we don't know if that's the case yet because it's only been a few days. But I think there's just a tendency on the internet to just kind of maximize. I think everybody feels like they're the first person to say things. is what I think it is.
Sure.
Where it's let me lay into this guy because nobody else has done it, even though they obviously know that other people have done it. But they feel like their take is more important. I was thinking about tweeting about it or even maybe doing a quick thing in the recap about it. But I was just it's probably not that necessary. The
Yeah,
guy knows what he did.
Yeah, I wasn't going to even cover it on SideQuest. I actually was working on a different episode about emulation, and I wasn't going to cover it based just on the Dead Cells thing. But after he put up that apology and all that and everything, I'm like, all right,
he definitely escalated it.
Yeah.
To a point where it was just more reasonable to comment on. Because it got more interesting as time went on, for sure.
I agree. His claim that things are coincidental or just not happening, like just fly in the face of the facts, or if we don't want to call them facts, we can call them like the overwhelming evidence. But I do wonder, like, people were like, well, what did you want to talk to him on Fireside Chats? And well, I wanted to kind of grill him at first. I want to be like, are you going to admit or not that you did this? Like, can you just admit that you did it? You know, like, can we talk that through? Can you talk to me why you do this? What is your process?
Right.
Have you done this before? But the one thing that I did want to ask him if I ever got a chance to talk to him was like, what kind of dark place does this bring you to? I have to know. Like, not to celebrate it or revel in it. I'm an inherently anxious and depressed person. Like, I am. I can only imagine whether or not you deserve it or not, the kind of place that guy is in right now must be horrifying.
It's got to rack your brain.
So you don't have to feel bad for him on a human level, but you kind of have to wonder. Inquisitive minds want to know, and I certainly want to know. It reminds me of like when a person does his time, right? And why I think that I mean, it's a weird example, but like why I think, and I support this idea that like people that are even felons shouldn't have to put that on their job applications once they're out of jail or out of prison. It's because like he did his time and the punishment was what we rendered it. So are you going to let it go or not? You know, or why don't you just keep him in prison forever?
Yeah,
and it's a similar thing to this where I'm like, okay, he was fired and ruined and destroyed his career. It's over.
That's it. That's all that really needs to happen.
You know, like now are we going to go after him forever? If you see him at the supermarket, are you going to ridicule him?
Well, here's what he did. He mishandled his career as a games reviewer. And he had his career as a games reviewer destroyed. I think that's pretty apt.
Yeah.
Right? That's as far as it really needs to go.
For sure.
Don't need to like send razor blades to his house or anything.
No, and there's no redemption arc here. Like I brought up Doris Kearns Goodwin before about how she had a massive redemption arc. She's on fucking Sunday shows every week to this day, and I actually really am quite fond of her. But
yeah,
there's no redemption arc here because he lied and didn't admit it, and there's more to it. But I think that people just need to think about, you know, I was pretty harsh on him in my video, but I actually edited out a lot of the harshness because I'm like, you know what? Like to your point, what purpose does this serve of me doubling, tripling, quadrupling down on this dude? Let's just put the facts out there. Let me tell you my opinion on what he did, and we can leave it there. And we can believe multiple things are true at once, and multiple things are true at once. This dude fucked up. This dude paid the price. This dude is ruined in our industry. This dude deserved it because of what he did. His choice. He did this to himself.
Right.
But you don't have to compound it by being a douchebag. You know?
Yeah.
Enough already with the douchebaggery. And I do say that from a point, and you the same way. We're both these kind of known entities in our corners of the internet, and people feel the need to say and do whatever they want to us at all times. And I am cognizant of that too. So remember, guys, multiple things can be true about this at the same time.
Right.
The punishment totally fit the crime, but you know, do you want to like? Does he now need to be in prison forever in an industry he's not even in anymore, or are you just gonna like move on? And certainly, you will all move on to the next victim. We all know that.
Yeah. T minus 10 seconds at this point. Somebody else is going to be in the news.
To Peter's other question, he asked what my process of reviewing games was at IGN, and it's actually the same process as it is now. There's no way for you to even figure out if you're stuck. I gave my anecdote about Neo the other episode about how it was stuck, but you sit and you play the game and you play it naturally and normally, and then sometimes you take notes, sometimes you don't. Sometimes I write little bullet points. Actually, when I did my God of War review just a few months ago, I posted on Instagram my notebook about like the things I was writing to give people a little bit of glimpse of my process and like the notes I make and stuff like that. And compared to investigative journalism, compared to previewing, compared to all this kind of stuff, it is super easy if you have any experience and you can be honest and let your thoughts flow through you and your opinions flow into words. That was, I guess, the other puzzling part of it, Chris, was like, I was like, he's not writing a doctoral dissertation. All you have to do is play a game and tell, and as I said in my video, answer the question, what do you think? It's really not that hard.
Yeah.
It really isn't.
And it's entirely opinion, but you can't really be wrong.
Anyone who tells you writing a review is hard is not good at it or lying to you, because it's just not hard. It just isn't. Like, I look forward to writing reviews for SideQuest because I know instantaneously, like, wow, I get to play a game, sit down, and render a verdict, and it's just way easier than me investigating something for 25 hours. It's just inherently the way it is. So my process is the same, and it's basically, it's just that. I try to take my time. I try to play it normally. I like to play games on hard, but when I review games, I play them on normal to get the best experience, because I know I frustrate the shit out of myself when I play on hard sometimes.
Yeah, that's a good rule.
And I try to give you the honest take. I try to remove my biases. I try to remove my relationships, all of those kinds of things. And at IGN, when we felt like even if I could remove my biases or relationships from an equation, we removed myself from that game. I didn't review any Insomniac games at IGN because I know those guys really well, for instance. I could have rendered a totally honest review. Actually, when Resistance 3 came out, someone in Australia wrote the review for us, and they were talking like, what would you have given the game, Colin? And I said, I would have given it a 9. And they're like, okay, we give it a 9. It was the same exact review. But you have to worry about those optical things too. So I try to worry about all those. I try to place it all on the table. I try to let you know how much I played and all of that. And it's up to you whether you take what I say with a grain of salt or not. Anton K says, have you guys ever been plagiarized? And he says here, I would love to hear Philip's reasoning for why he did it. Stress, outside work issues. I love that too. That's what I tried to get to the bottom of before, the powers that be and the moronic powers that be in the games media tried to yell at me for it. He must have had a reason to risk and lose what many consider a dream job. I think he's just lazy, and I thought he wasn't going to get caught. But to your original thing, my videos have been copied, and I assume like my old facts have been copied and stuff like that, but I don't know that I've ever been like outwardly plagiarized. Have you?
Yeah, I really can't point to a point in time where I can remember that ever happening. It's a lot harder to plagiarize the stuff that I do.
That's true.
It would take a long time and a lot of Premiere classes.
That's true.
I've had people re-upload my stuff.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
I flagged it because it's mine, but nothing really to plagiarize. I think it's worse when you're freebooted. Personally, I'd rather be plagiarized than freebooted.
Sure. Have
my own content uploaded to Facebook and get millions of views, and I'm like, oh, cool, neat.
Yeah,
there's no system in place to protect you.
Yeah, it's totally ridiculous. I understand people's sympathies towards this guy, like the few people that have sympathy towards him in the sense that like there are only a certain amount of ways you can describe things. Certainly if you compared people's writings over time, there are even programs I think you can use where you can like copy and paste things and it's like, this is 15% similar, but when you look at them, they're really not similar. It's like you're using the same phraseology or you're using, you have a similar idea. But when you see those things in sequence over and over again for an entire review, you know that the jig is up. It's not like he's just saying the movement is fluid and I said the movement is fluid.
Or it wasn't a single point.
No, because otherwise you like I just, again, Chris, don't understand who the fuck researches a review.
Yeah, I don't know.
Totally.
I watch a lot of reviews, but I also don't review.
That's exactly right.
So
the fact that he said like that's the way critics I've known have done it, I'm like, well, the critics that do that are dumb. Number 4. Sony has officially sold 525.3 million pieces of PlayStation hardware since the original launch of the PlayStation in Japan in 1994. To celebrate, the company is releasing a special edition translucent blue PS4 Pro, aptly named the 500 million limited edition PS4 Pro, which will be limited in its run to 50,000 individual numbered units. It'll cost $500 here in the States and $640 in Canada, and will come packing a 2 terabyte hard drive. A separate DualShock 4 will be released in commemoration as well as a limited edition gold wireless headset. The console goes on sale on August 24th, while the controller and headset will launch in September. Did you see pictures of these?
No, I haven't seen it at all. This took me by surprise.
It's pretty cool. The big thing about this is, like, all right, there's 50,000 of them. Go get them. I don't care. We talked about how I don't care about any of these consoles, and we're going to get into some questions about this. But the bigger thing is that I did the math. And there's hidden math in this number that I think people will be very interested in.
What?
Because PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, and PSP numbers are up to date and public. Vita numbers have not been shared in 4 years. And if you take all the numbers from PS1, PS2, PS3, PS4, and PSP and combine them, you get about 505 million or so, meaning that Vita has sold about 20 million units, if these numbers are to be believed. Huh. So I was surprised that more people weren't doing that math. So there's that.
You're probably also the only person on the planet who's paying attention to Vita.
Touche. That's a fair point.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when EA releases like this is how many next gen consoles have been released, and then they just subtract PS4's numbers, and that's how we find out how Xbox One numbers were. I just thought it was interesting that Vita's, failed as bad as you thought it did. So,
whoops.
We got some questions here though.
That's cool though. By the way, 2 terabyte hard drive. Yes.
That's great.
That should be a minimum default, to be honest.
Agreed. I'm sure it will be on the new, the PS5s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lucas Gremista wrote in and said, I'm thinking of buying the recently announced limited edition PS4 Pro 500 million edition, which looks awesome, by the way, to possibly keep. But if it starts fetching over 1,000 on eBay, I might sell it. Am I a terrible person? What do you make of that?
Is he a terrible person?
Is scalping and selling at profit a limited edition item like that make him terrible?
I wouldn't say it makes you terrible. It makes you a bit of a scummy dude. If you're just going to buy it for that explicit purpose. But at the same time, it's like, get money. If you can get money, get money. I'm not gonna fault you for it, but I'm gonna judgingly glance every so often, maybe.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I don't know. My dad used to say this thing to me that something is worth what someone will pay for it. And the only way that he comes off as purely scummy to me is if he's the only one doing it. But you have to have some sort of agreement with the 50,000 people that acquired these consoles that no one's going to resell it.
Yeah.
I just feel like
Yeah.
part of the market is reselling your items for whatever. Is he a scumbag for doing that? I guess that's up to you to decide, but I would call the person buying it for $1,000 a moron.
That's also true.
You know, like,
No, that's actually also true. This console, by the way, I just looked up, looks beautiful.
it does. It's very pretty.
Oh my god.
I'm going to keep an eye out. Maybe I'll try to buy one. I don't know. And maybe
That is a pretty looking machine.
if I do get one, I'm going to keep it in the box, you know, and not use it, just as I did with my 20th anniversary PS4, which is sealed in the box still. But I'm not, maybe I'll sell it in many years from now, but I'm not going to sell it immediately. You know, when in 50 years, I'll go on Antiques Roadshow and be like, look at this fucking thing I got. But I don't think it's a scumbag move. I mean, I know that's going to be an unpopular take, but the market can take what the market can take. And I don't know that you should be going out to buy these things just to scalp them. But if you buy them and notice that it's worth more to you to sell it than it is for you to keep it, I don't know that that's any different than anyone else reselling anything under the sun.
No, I think it's just the image of a scalper in my head. And he used that specific word.
Sure.
So I immediately was like, are you just going to be on the street? On the street with like a trench coat?
Yeah,
You're
exactly.
like, I got this limited edition 500 million sold PS4 here.
This bulbous trench coat
Yeah,
with
it's a
gigantic box in it. I'm of two minds with it, where I think it's within your right to do it. It's within your right to, because if you start curtailing and judging people for that, then like, where does it stop? What
That's
if you,
true.
like, you just bought the Halo 3 helmet, right?
That's true, yeah.
And you didn't pay like a premium for it, but just because the person bought it, does that mean he has to now keep it forever? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, there's too many ways out of this.
That's true, yeah. That's a fair point, actually. Yeah, never mind.
So I don't condone
You're not a scumbag.
Yeah, I don't condone it, but I'm not gonna like sit here and ridicule you either. Again, remember that on the other side of this is a dumb buyer. Nicholas Hickman wrote in us and said, hey guys, slightly offbeat question. Should the PS5, in your estimation, buck the recent Sony trend and be finished in the OG gray of the PS1 rather than the black finish that literally every new PlayStation has had since? For my money, the PS4 20th Anniversary Edition is the best looking console they've ever made and would relish the chance to own a PlayStation in that color scheme again. What do you think? PS5 is totally hypothetical right now,
Yeah.
but do you anticipate that it'll be black again?
Probably. I don't see why they would change. Like the PS2 was black, the PS3 was black, the PS4 was black. Just seems to make sense at this point. I do have an affinity for that gray, that PS1 gray, just because the PS1 was like my favorite console ever. So I have an affinity for that color, but it's at the same time, it's like, I don't know, black just like works well in home entertainment. It just works better in home entertainment systems. So I don't really know.
Cole Boulis asks us a question that I think we've touched on before, but I want to bring it up again since it's timely based on this limited edition. He says, in light of the 500 million limited edition PS4 announcement, I was wondering what your guys' opinion was on game-specific or limited edition console designs and variations. Every game console I've ever owned has been the standard launch version except for my Glacier White Vita. I think the Glacier White Vita came with, Assassin's Creed. Have you guys ever bought or tempted by limited edition console variants? I'm not. I want this one because I just need a PS4 Pro, so I might as well just do it. But do you ever care?
Not really. It's never been something like there are points where I've seen like pretty cool systems where I'm like, oh, that looks pretty cool. That looks neat. I like that. But none that I would jump at the opportunity to own, because at the end of the day, I appreciate them. I'll say that. I'll put it that way. I appreciate the hell out of them. I think they look really beautiful, and when they're well done, they're really well done. But I just prefer to have something in my entertainment system that looks like it belongs there.
Right.
You know?
Right.
I thought the red PS4 for Spider-Man looks cool. I don't think I would be too remiss having that in a... That's because it's also like a solid color, you know? When it gets like weird... like a Batman PS4.
Yeah.
My friend had a Batman PS4, and I was like, what is this?
Yeah,
it's like the worst looking thing I've ever seen.
I don't know. I completely agree with you in that I want the most inert sort of thing on my entertainment system. I don't want to even look twice at it.
Yeah.
Don't worry about it.
But
Don't
I
look
like
there.
him. I like him. They're cool.
But I'm excited. I mean, clearly people get excited about them because they do them more and more and more.
No,
and
absolutely. And that blue one actually does look really, really beautiful. Like that's something that I couldn't see, that I can see putting in a home entertainment system and not being bothered by.
It reminds me of my old PS2 controller. I had a PS2 controller that I think was very similar to that, a translucent blue.
Yeah.
Anyway, number 5, God of War is getting a new Game Plus mode, and it's coming in hot. On August 20th, a full 4 months away from the game's launch to the date. New Game Plus will be released for consumption completely free of charge and included in a new update. In God of War's New Game Plus, you can carry over much of your gear, such as armor and talisman, to a new adventure, fight familiar enemies with tougher attacks and more health, mess around with a new resource called Scap Slag that'll allow you to upgrade your maxed out equipment even higher, and do all of that while skipping cutscenes and cinematics at your leisure. You guys can find out more information on the PlayStation blog post where I got all this information. What do you think of this New Game Plus? Will you play it?
Honestly, probably not, just because there's a lot coming in the coming months. Red Dead and I know Spider-Man's going to consume me for a long time because I used to replay those games infinitely. But I'm happy that this exists, and I'm happy that it's free because we're in an environment right now where that actually might not have been.
Right.
So I appreciate it. I'll probably hit God of War up really late in the year. I think like maybe December once I've forgotten a lot of it, because it's still pretty fresh in my head right now. And it's a very story-based game, and the story kind of drives you through that game. It drove me through that game. The gameplay was like a secondary thing that wasn't bad at all. It was very, very refined and very, very, it felt really good, but it wasn't necessarily the reason that I was playing it.
Sure.
I was playing that game specifically to see what was going to happen.
Sure.
And now that that's gone, I was like, all right, well, I didn't really bother with the challenges either, like those after things to unlock like Niflheim and stuff like that. Right. Yeah, I never really bothered with it because I was like, I like this gameplay, but I'm satisfied. So maybe. I don't know, maybe I'll jump into it.
Well, I appreciate, much to what the point you were making was, I appreciate that Sony Santa Monica and Sony as a publisher are allowing at least a portion of that team to kind of explore free updates and calibrate the game to the specifications of the people that are still buying it and still playing it. And I think that that's really cool and that's really exciting, especially 4 months out. The game did extraordinarily well, so they have the room to do that. Mm-hmm. But I also feel like, from me personally, I platinumed the game and deleted it off my console. The chances of me ever going back and playing God of War again are close to zero. Like, probably even less than zero, to be honest with you. I to your point, I can't imagine ever playing that God of War game again. Maybe if they release an actual DLC, like single player DLC pack, which I think they might do. I don't know that I'll go back, and I never even went back and played Horizon's DLC, and I love Horizon more than I love God of War. So,
right. I forgot you're like a psycho.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
What gave it up to you? The fact that I had a baby YouTube video up on my phone,
I'm very bad
at
taking cues, it seems.
I'm a troubled youth, I'll tell you what. Number 6, as I told you over and over again, Rage 2 isn't being co-developed by id Software and Avalanche Studios. At QuakeCon 2018, IGN spoke to Rage 2's game director, Magnus Nedfors, who said, quote, "We at Avalanche are making the game. It's a close collaboration still with the people at id, learning from them when it comes to the shooting and so on," end quote. Don't ever doubt me again. Okay? I got a lot of Colin was right tweets at me,
right,
which I appreciate. This one was obvious. It was obvious it wasn't making this game. But I'm glad that they were able to confirm that. Everyone's got a little bit of an ego. Some people have a lot of an ego.
You're feeling pretty good.
That's not even where I was going, but I feel great about that. But what I was going to say was, imagine being an Avalanche and watching id get all the credit for your game.
Yeah, right?
Eventually, you probably have to go to Bethesda as a publisher and be like, can we talk about the fact that they're not making it? Because, like, we are making the game, you know?
Yeah,
and I assume that that's probably pretty frustrating.
I thought it was also pretty obvious from the fact that they're making Doom. And Doom looks great.
Right, exactly.
Like if Doom looked like shit, I'd be like, oh, maybe they are.
Right.
Maybe they are splitting resources, but nope.
No.
Also, Rage looks pretty cool.
It does look cool. They showed more of it. It looks great. I don't need to see any more of it.
I think I'm done with it. Done looking at it. I think I'm done with Doom too. Like I'm sold on Doom.
Right.
I'm good.
I'm in absolute agreement with you. By the way, in case you guys are curious, Avalanche is 2 studios. They have one in Stockholm, Sweden. They have one in New York City. They did confirm Stockholm, as we know. The guys that did Mad Max are making this game. That makes sense because of the DNA of Mad Max is going to be in Rage 2.
Yeah.
Just Cause is obviously being made in New York City. Number 7. In 2017, ZeniMax, the parent company of publisher Bethesda, acquired a Texas-based studio called Escalation. At QuakeCon 2018, Bethesda revealed that the studio is now called Bethesda Game Studios Dallas, and it's been confirmed that the team there is working on Starfield, presumably alongside Bethesda Game Studios' main team in Maryland. This could conceivably mean that Starfield isn't as far out as we think, though it's probably a next-gen game that we won't see until 2020 or so. Bethesda first started working with the team there when it created Doom's snap map editor in 2016. So congratulations to the guys at Escalation for joining a very healthy family of developers.
Yeah, that's awesome. Oh my God.
And I'll be interested to see what they're doing on Starfield and if they're doing kind of like cleanup duty or if they're actually helping lead the charge. Depending on the semantics, Chris, if this Dallas-based studio is working on the brunt of Starfield, it's conceivable that The Elder Scrolls 6 isn't as far off as we think, still in the early 2020s for sure. But
yeah,
I need to know more about this dynamic. I want to know more about it.
It's a little... feels a bit nebulous right now, up in the air.
I'm still of the mind, by the way, that Bethesda will acquire Avalanche.
Do you think that's riding on Rage 2?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I feel like that would be a very wise studio to acquire. Let's go through their family a little bit. They have Tango in Japan. Those are the guys that make The Evil Within. And they make survival horror games, third-person survival horror games. Clearly, they're working on another Evil Within game. They have Machine Games in Europe, and they make first-person shooters. They have id in Texas. They make shooters. They now have this Dallas studio that's working on third-person role-playing games. They have Bethesda Game Studios that's doing their thing. They have Arcane, and obviously they have the Bethesda Online stuff too, but that does Elder Scrolls Online. So they don't have a team that specializes in action-oriented open-world fluidity kind of games.
Yeah.
And Avalanche would make sense. Maybe Avalanche doesn't want to sell, but I feel like this is a test bed.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
And this is how Sony used to acquire studios as well. They would work with them and then they'd buy them. They'd work with Big, they'd get Pursuit Force, they'd buy them. They'd work with Evolution, they'd get, World Rally Championship, they'd buy them. They work with Sucker Punch, they get Sly Cooper and Infamous, they buy them. So we'll see what happens. Same thing with Guerrilla, same thing with a lot of studios.
Yeah.
Number 8. In a conversation with Games Industry International, Capcom Europe COO Stuart Turner spoke about the conflict between critical reception and commercial success, framing the discussion around Resident Evil 6 and Resident Evil 7. RE6 was critically panned but sold 7.1 million units worldwide, while Resident Evil 7, widely considered the best Resident Evil game in well over a decade, reviewed exceptionally but sold 5.1 million units. Which situation is preferable? Turner told the website, quote, "While we have shareholders to appease, it's not just about commercial performance. There is an artistic element that always comes in where we know that this is the right way. And while if we compare RE7 to RE6, the absolute numbers are not the same in terms of profitability. Ellipsis. It's completely fine. It ticked all of our boxes internally. It was really well received. And in some respects, getting some very good review scores counts as much for Capcom as a game that sells millions and millions and millions. We'd prefer a game that got a 9 and sold less than got a 6 but sold more." End quote. What do you make of that? It's an interesting admission.
I think that's great.
I think it's true.
It's good. I don't know. I hope so. That'd be a good thing to find out that's, actually at play. The fact that quality actually does kind of matter. I don't know. I don't know how accurate that is. It's all hearsay, really, right, at this point?
Right.
It's just kind of a press thing.
Resident Evil 6 is the only mainline Resident Evil game that I didn't play because I was like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And I was surprised by how well it sold. But Resident Evil 7 was such a nice step in the right direction. Did you enjoy Resident Evil 7?
No, I didn't. I played a little bit of it, and I didn't really give it a chance, if I'm being totally honest.
It's awesome.
I was like, I've heard nothing but good things about it, but I played it for a little bit, and I was like, my God, I am so slow. I think it was because I was playing Doom literally before. So, like, when you go from Doom to Resident Evil 7, it's a bit painful.
It's a bit jarring.
Yeah, it's a bit. It's so painfully slow.
I was really quite impressed with it, dude. I really do recommend that you go back if you ever have the time. Again, we're talking about this glut of games we're playing. I heard it's exceptional on PSVR as well. I didn't play it on PlayStation VR. I played it normally, the normal way, but I heard it's quite the experience that way. And I think in the same piece, Mr. Turner talks about how that they're still happy that RE7 is selling and is still a seminal PSVR game. In other words, like it's still pushing units and it has a longer burn, which I think is cool. So
yeah.
If any of you out there haven't played Resident Evil 7, I highly recommend it. I think it's really, really, really surprisingly good.
Do you think there's merit to that? Do you think that they actually think that, though? What about you? Like, what do you think about it?
I think they probably do think that, or they'd be wise to think that, because if Capcom destroys its reputation by releasing... If they take an 18-month or 2-year period and they release, say, a series of 6 games that are underwhelming that sell well, then people are just not going to trust them anymore.
Yeah.
And so it has long-term deficits by kind of putting your faith into the into the commercial aspects of it and not the creative aspects of it. So I think that they'd be wise to believe that, because now Resident Evil 8 or whatever they follow it up with in the future, there's going to be anticipation for it. They're not going to have to push it as hard. And while there'll be expectations and they'll have to meet and exceed those expectations, people will get in the door with optimism. Yeah. I got into the door with RE7 with pessimism, and I was pleasantly surprised. I don't think that's the way you always want to sell your games. And Capcom's on the upswing, dude. Like they're totally reviving themselves, and it's really cool to watch, as opposed to Konami, which has destroyed itself. Number 9. Is Ubisoft quietly working on Child of Light 2? It appears so if a tweet from Patrick Plord, creative director at Ubisoft Montreal, is any indication. Plord tweeted a picture out of the original Child of Light, released in 2014, running on Nintendo Switch, which is not a huge surprise since Child of Light has come to virtually every piece of modern hardware, including PS Vita. In the background of his desk, though, is an obscure document that appears to read Child of Light 2. The tweet is still up, indicating that Plord made no mistake in showing it off. Is it an intentional Easter egg, something to throw journalists and podcasters like us off, or a subtle way to hint that Child of Light 2 is en route?
I mean, probably exists.
Did you play Child of Light?
Yeah.
Really, really stunningly beautiful and fun.
Right?
Game. Yeah.
Came out of nowhere. That was the Ubisoft indie, right?
Yeah, it was like UB Art or whatever they're calling it.
UB Arts.
That and
Valiant Hearts.
Right.
Yeah.
Which was another, not as good, but another great game.
I didn't play Valiant Hearts, admittedly.
Yeah,
but Child of Light surprised me. I really, because I don't normally like those kinds of games, but I was like weirdly enamored with it. I didn't finish it though. I should finish it.
It's short. I think it's probably fewer than 10 hours.
I think I was like really close to finishing it, and then I got sucked away from.
That's what happens.
Yeah.
That's what happened with me with Doom. You know, I played Doom, and then you just get distracted, and then that's a game where you're like on the 10th level, and you can't. How can you possibly jump back in and have any idea what you're doing?
I remember. I think I beat Doom on the same PlayStation I started it. Like I did not put that shit down. It's a problem.
I mean, it's not a problem if you enjoyed it. It's a good thing for you. I can't wait for us to do the show when Doom Eternal comes out and see how you feel about it. So many games in between now and then, though.
Yeah, I know. Ugh.
For better or for worse. Number 10. Both Persona 3 Dancing in Moonlight and Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight are officially coming to the West on both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation Vita, confirming earlier news, and will launch on December 4th, accelerating their original release window.
That's my birthday.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. You're only 2 days away from my brother. Easy enough to remember. We'll do something special for you. Accelerating their original release window, which was in 2019. The PS4 iterations of the game will be available digitally and at retail, while the Vita iterations will be digital only. Collections for both PS4 and Vita, combining both games, are also available, and Persona 4 Dancing All Night, which came to Vita in 2015 in the West, will now be available on PS4 if you grab the PS4 collection that combines both games. For people that don't know, these are basically accompanying Persona games that are kind of like dance and rhythm games, and they're pretty popular in Japan, and they're coming West, and if you're into Persona, more power to you.
It's cool. More variety is always good.
Absolutely. And I like how Atlas is willing to publish Vita games still. One of the few publishers that are willing to do it, which is great. The final note for news, number 11. The country of Germany has typically had a blanket ban on references to Nazism, Nazi Germany, the swastika, the Holocaust, and other Nazi-related terminology, history, and symbolism in video games released in the country. This has most recently affected Bethesda's and Machine Games' Wolfenstein 2: The New Colossus, which needed to be heavily edited before being released in the country. However, according to a report from Games Industry International, who we're citing again, this won't be the case moving forward. At least not necessarily. Instead of there being a blanket ban with very little, if any, possible recourse, games that deal with Nazi-related subject matter or iconography can now be submitted to a classifications board called the Entertainment Software Self-Regulation Body, not at all unlike our own ESRB. Video games have been the only notable exclusion from art, literature, film, TV shows, and more in Germany, which are treated in a looser way depending on any number of criteria. Video games, for the first time, will now be treated differently, which is awesome for German gamers. So, for people that don't know, I think it's in the German Constitution, and they have a blanket ban on Nazi iconography and stuff like that for obvious reasons, since, their grandparents, nearly destroyed the world. I personally don't think anyone that wasn't involved in it has anything to do with that, and I think you kind of have to move on. Like, we have to forgive everyone, just like we are not responsible for American slavery or something like that. So yeah. I feel like it's a little ridiculous to hold this against them in a generational way. But
right.
Finally, video games are joining the pantheon of other creations in Germany that will be hopefully allowed to not be heavily edited like Wolfenstein was, where they removed the swastikas from the game and everything, which is fucking insane.
That's kind of the point.
Are you guys that ashamed? I mean, you should be ashamed that happened, but you didn't.
It's a video game about killing Nazis.
Right, and you didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
Your forefathers did.
So just to be clear, they made a whole regulation body for it?
I guess the regulation body already exists to give...
And it's called the Entertainment Software Self-Regulation Body?
Yeah. I guess that's the translation from German.
Oh, because I was about to say, it's very interesting that I think it's funny that they're submitting a Nazi iconography to something called the ESSRB.
Oh, I see. Well, Sacred Symbols is also SS as well.
Oof.
Get that crying baby in here. Where's that crying baby?
No. It's like that Simpsons. It's like that Simpsons joke. It's he's already dead.
That's it for the news.
Yeah.
Let's get into the new game releases. Good news, Chris. The new game releases are flowing like wine.
Yeah, wow. This is a huge list.
We have a huge list, and they're going to continue to come. So Ryan Clemence's absence from PlayStation confirmed will not affect the drop, so we have funny and interesting things to read.
Ah, beautiful.
Death's Gambit comes to PS4. Death's Gambit is a hardcore 2D action platformer with rich RPG elements. Master the precise combat and confront the horrors that lurk deep within Cyrodiil. The game's supposed to be really good.
Oh, cool.
It's a Metroidvania. We are getting a glut of them. Detective Gallo comes to PS4. Detective Gallo is a point-and-click comic noir adventure that is entirely hand-illustrated and hand-animated, and whose protagonist is a feathered and grumpy private eye.
Feathered.
Doggone Golfing comes to PS4. Doggone Golfing is a fun pick-up-and-play arcade golf game where cute dogs slap hockey pucks around the globe. Play your angles just right, and you can become the legendary K9 puck master. Why is it called Doggone Golfing if he's playing hockey?
Wait, what? Oh.
I'm a little confused about that.
I almost didn't even catch it because I was like bombarded by words that don't belong together.
Because you're zoning out. I'm zoning out and I'm reading them. Domino Craft VR comes to PlayStation VR. Domino Craft is a casual VR game with user-generated content. Create domino formations just like in real life, but without the limits of time, space, and materials. You can also share your work with friends and have fun together.
I'm so excited. I've been a fan of Domino Craft for years.
Sounds fucking awful. Guns, Gore, and Cannoli 2 comes to PlayStation 4. I never heard of the first Guns, Gore, and Cannoli. Guns, Gore, and Cannoli 2 revives the good old action platform run-and-gun genre with humor added. In this sequel to Guns, Gore, and Cannoli, Vinnie Cannoli's story continues, and this time, it's personal.
Vinnie Cannoli. I was kind of hoping that this was the first one, and they called it 2 regardless.
As an Italian man myself, I must say that that's profoundly racist.
Vinnie Cannoli? That's so good.
I am Italian, and I'm saying that that's racism. Hero Defense comes to PlayStation 4. It's released on the 16th. In order to destroy the world's most powerful vampire, your team of slayers must impale, slash, tear, and burn through legions of undead hell-bent on world domination.
I dig it.
Persian Knights Sands of Wonder comes to PlayStation 4. It's a 17th release. In the absence of a mortally ill king, the Grand Vizier Zavid rules the kingdom with an iron fist. The young apothecary Tara decides, there's a typo here, it says, conduct, but it's supposed to be to, conduct her own investigation and discover the cause of the illness before it's too late. And I know that's a typo because I copied and pasted that.
Oh, God.
Phantom Doctrine comes to PlayStation 4. The year is 1983, the year before I was born. The world teeters on the verge of destruction as the Cold War tightens its icy grip. East or west, trust no one, question everything. The fate of humanity rests in your hands as you pit spy versus spy in Phantom Doctrine.
I miss Spy vs. Spy.
Do you?
No.
Okay, I thought you were lying. Oh my God, there's so many more games. State of Mind comes to PlayStation 4 on the 15th. When mind and machine become one, what will remain of humanity? State of Mind is a futuristic thriller game delving into transhumanism. The game explores a world torn between a dystopian material reality and a utopian virtual future. Super Knight Riders comes to PlayStation 4. Super Knight Riders is a modern arcade racing game inspired by the retro classics. It's all about traveling as far as possible while dodging rival riders and reaching each checkpoint before the timer hits 0. Terra Tech comes to PlayStation 4. Explore, build, and craft and battle across alien worlds in this physics-based construction sandbox adventure. The fuck does that mean?
What?
Scavenge, craft, and buy new parts in order to survive and become the ultimate planetary prospector.
That almost sounds like appealing, just because I like sandbox stuff. Like, think that's just like physics oriented.
How do you feel about sandboxes? Like if you went like a real sandbox,
like a literal sandbox,
yeah,
like a box of sand.
Yeah, did you like those when you were a kid?
No,
I never understood
No,
the
I hated
appeal of them. There was like this sad little pit of sand over here that
it was just like here's a square hole in the ground where you get dirty in,
and the sand is just there for decades. Like it's just there for decades, like just touching everyone and everything. Can you imagine?
I hadn't even considered that.
Oh my God, I considered that at a very young age. Believe me. Treadnoughts comes to PlayStation 4 on the 17th. Gracefully pilot your tank through gorgeous arenas to land a deadly shot on your opponents. It's all about moving with style. Vroom Kaboom comes to PlayStation 4. A tower rush with vehicles. Vroom Kaboom combines elements from collectible card games, tower defense, and multiplayer online battles. Engage in 1v1, 2v2, or 3v3 battles and even take to the roads in our full-featured VR mode. Wailing Heights, we're almost done, I promise. Wailing Heights comes to PlayStation 4.
Good Lord.
A body-hopping musical adventure game set in with... Wait, what the fuck does this say? A body-hopping musical adventure game set in with the horrific hamlet of modern monsters? What? Does anyone edit this shit? After being invited to a gig in a town no one's ever heard of, Francis Finkelstein is trapped in a holding cell charged with the crime of being alive. That is a crime. Finally, The Walking Dead, the final season, comes to PlayStation 4. After years on the road facing threats in both living and dead, a secluded school might finally be Clementine's chance for a home. But protecting it will mean sacrifice. In this gripping, emotional final season, your choices will define your relationships and determine how Clementine's story ends. It's probably the only game worthwhile other than a couple others probably to check out.
Yeah, that seems to be the big one.
Death's Gambit is the other one I'm thinking of. But that's it. Chris, let's get into the reader mail.
All right.
We've decided we're going to stick with calling it reader mail, even though it makes no sense.
Yeah. The best things in life make no sense.
That's true. But are the best things in life free?
Air? I guess air is not particularly great.
No.
Just kind of necessary. Yeah.
It's true. I've always been fascinated by the fact that we need oxygen, but it's like such a minority of element in our air. Nitrogen dominates our air, but we need oxygen. I've always found that kind of curious.
There's a lesson in that somewhere.
There probably is. You're right. Jason Buller writes in and says, "Hey guys, Konami finally showed up via Nintendo. The last iteration of Smash introduced Capcom's Boy in Blue several years prior to him making an official comeback. Do you think this means anything along the lines of going back to the Castlevania franchise or letting others take on the series outside of Mercury Steam, which is the studio that, of course, ruined Castlevania?" What do you think? Did you see the Smash trailer for Simon and Richter?
I did. I saw it, and I didn't think that it meant anything. And I don't know. Does that, when they unveil a Smash character, does that typically mean they're going to do anything with the property? I don't think so.
No, not necessarily, but I think that you could read into it with Konami because they're so strange and they've basically ignored Castlevania for so long that maybe their inclusion indicates either a willingness to just play ball finally or maybe a hint of what's to come.
Do you think they care? Maybe they just care so little that Nintendo was like, "Yo, can we do this?" And they were like, "Eh."
Yeah. They're like, "We're too busy with our fitness clubs right now. You can do whatever you want." Perhaps. And I'm sure there was money involved in it as well.
Well, yeah.
And there's a cross-promotional element to it, too, because people will be, especially younger gamers will now be interested in maybe what Castlevania is and go on Virtual Console and buy those games. I like that it's Simon and Richter, and I especially liked Richter. I know Richter's an Echo fighter, but I like that, he comes in with his Castlevania Symphony of the Night quotes and stuff like that. Yeah. It's really cool. And the end of the video is a pretty subtle nod to Castlevania 2, which is one of my favorite Castlevania games and a pretty obscure one. The mask coming through the window and looking at them through the window, that's a boss from Castlevania 2. Totally random kind of thing. I thought that was really neat.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Ray Briggs wrote in and said, "When is the last time you touched anything PSVR? Do you think it will be a big part of the PS5? I have one and I've used it maybe twice. It just collects dust since it's a hassle to bring out." What do you make of that?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't played much with PSVR. I do have a Vive, which I haven't touched in a while because I've been busy, but I love that thing. And I use it as often as I can possibly, see myself using it. I don't know if the PSVR will be a big part of PS5. I'm sure they'll probably have a new iteration of it, I think, because they kind of have to, because I think it's weak compared to literally any other VR thing that you can find. So I think they're probably gonna have to step it up if they choose to continue investing in this, which that's all up in the air too. So I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. I think first of all, I think PS5 is gonna have to play nicely with probably the original PSVR, especially because we're talking about backwards compatibility and stuff like that. But I think that we're gonna get a new iteration, as you're saying, that doesn't need this ancillary and outside box for processing, and so we'll have something a little more elegant. Because I agree with him, the PSVR is a mess. And to answer his question, I have not played PSVR the entire time I've lived in Los Angeles. So it's just put away. And actually Erin's always eager to take it out because she loves it, but you can't just leave it out because it's just a goddamn mess. There's plugs going in the back, in the front, into the system, in all, into the headset until they make, and I understand that they had to do all those things to make it cheap and to make it accessible and all of that, but it does make it hard to make it, we were talking earlier about kind of having these things in your entertainment system that are focal points of it. And this will be a focal point of it and it'll be a cool conversation piece, etc. But it's too burdensome right now to play that role for me.
Yeah.
Sergio DeVivo says, "Hey, Colin and Chris."
Hey.
Gotcha. He said pregnant pause until Chris said hello. "Loving the interaction between you guys. Great chemistry and, dare I say it, a nice sexual tension."
Is this where you were asking me about your legs?
Maybe I was leading into this the whole time. I was just curious. I'm not even talking sexually. I'm just curious.
You're psycho. You suffer from extreme psychosis.
Yeah. On a serious note, my question is about Final Fantasy 15 and the state of patches into games. I remember playing it at launch and finding it okay, but then replaying it a month ago and loving the hell out of it. My question specifically is it okay to support these types of activities? Should the developer be commended for sticking to their game and improving it so drastically from launch, or should they be criticized for not shipping a complete product? I want to commend this type of commitment to the game 2 years later, but I don't want to tell them it's okay to ship an incomplete game. Do they deserve my money? Keep fucking that chicken. Nice reference. What do you think of this? Because I guess there are only really two ways to look at it. Were they negligent in releasing a game that wasn't up to snuff, or are they cool for supporting it so long after launch?
This is a very two minds kind of question for me. I think I like what they've done with No Man's Sky. I like what they've done with Siege. I like what they're doing with other games that have failed tremendously, like the Master Chief Collection is a big one on the Xbox, which is like the biggest failure I've seen in years. They're doing like an insider program to fix that. That's awesome, and I appreciate that. But yeah, you shouldn't have to be in that situation in the first place. If you can't make the game good, wait until it's good, and then put it out when it's good. Like, it's great that people aren't just like buying horrendous games and being stuck with them, because that's shit for everyone. But I don't know. It's I have mixed feelings.
I think we can look at it two ways. We just talked about God of War getting New Game Plus, right?
Yeah.
And the game reviewed well, and it was great out of the box with a day one update, but nothing was broken.
What was
about
the day
it.
one update? It was just like subtitle sizes or something.
Yeah,
like
there
that,
were there was just a small patch to correct some things that probably should have been corrected to begin with, but they did it, and everyone experienced those updates. And God of War was a great game out of the box day one. And I don't think you could say the same thing about Final Fantasy 15. So when God of War is getting updated with New Game Plus and all these free updates months later, that seems like an extra above and beyond sort of thing that I think should be commended. I think with Final Fantasy 15, it was clear that they had a shit or got off the pot with that game. That game was just in development forever, and people were just constantly losing their patience, and I was making fun of it for years. And so, yeah, I think that they deserve credit, but it's also, to what he's saying, what needed to be done to begin with. And
yeah.
There's a balance there, I think, between the two. I think you're seeing a great example with Sony Santa Monica, maybe a more negligent and strange example with Square Enix.
Yeah,
I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, that's fair.
Sean Huseman says, "Hey guys, hope everything is going well. Why do the bigger gaming media sites mostly ignore Japanese games? Sure, we hear about the huge AAA Japanese games, but it's usually smaller sites reporting on mid-tier or more niche Japanese games. I find this confusing since Western indie games get a fairly large amount of coverage. Personally, I feel it's due to not fitting the more left-leaning mindset of games journalists, and really shows a lack of depth of what they are willing to be open to. Do you think that there's a political component to this?"
No, I think it's entirely just what's relevant to the culture that you're in. Like, I have no idea what Polish indie games are coming out, you know? I know of the big things from Poland, like The Witcher,
Yep.
you know? And
Sure.
I know of, like, the big things from Ukraine, like Metro. I don't know if there's any other Ukrainian indie games, you know?
There probably are, but to your point,
They're
yeah,
probably,
who knows?
but like I really don't think politics is in the equation at all. I think it's just what's on people's radar, what's most likely to be interesting to people over here, is just stuff that maybe isn't so detached from what you're already seeing. You
Fair
know?
enough. Yeah.
I think that's most likely.
I think you're right. I think, like, to give perspective, there's only so many resources a website has. The only reason at IGN that Vita was so heavily covered and that niche and more obscure and Japanese games were so heavily covered is because I wanted to and I insisted that we do it.
Yeah.
And the reason that stuff stopped when I left is because no one else did. And you have to look at your traffic. You have to look at what people are interested in. If you have, say, 10 writers and there are 25 games, that means you can really only cover conceivably 10 games at a time. And so the other 15 are going to kind of fall by the wayside. Maybe you have a review from a freelancer. Maybe you have some preview coverage or just some videos or anecdotal stuff. But there's a deficit. If someone goes and covers the new Japanese visual novel with inappropriate, seemingly very inappropriate sexual content, for instance, I don't know that that's a political stance as much as that's like there are just more important things and more relevant things for this audience to cover. or cover for the audience, I should say. And so I wouldn't look at it too politically. Certainly there are these people that like to clutch their pearls and climb on their crosses about the content, especially the sexual content and kind of the representation of women or underage girls or whatever the case might be in some Japanese video games, that there are different mores between cultures and those things don't always translate, and the right or wrong of that is for people to decide. But I don't know that that plays necessarily into the coverage of it, because when there's a big, more niche Japanese game like Danganronpa or something like that, you get coverage of it.
Yeah, and also just kind of like an asterisk to this, I feel like if it was politically motivated, you'd have more articles about those kinds of things because people love to complain. So if people were like opposed to the politics of like some indie Japanese games, people would, if it was entirely politically motivated, you'd have a ton of people writing, pearl clutching headlines about it, I think.
Perfectly fair point.
Yeah.
And a great point. Kenny Gutzler says, "Hello, gentlemen. I, unlike most of my friends, are one of the few that still enjoy to collect games and have a library to look back on. Most of the games really only collect dust, as most I rarely revisit. Could you see the next generation of systems abandoning physical copies of games? The only real physical games would be essential, a loot box of commemorative items as you currently see with expensive Ultimate whatever editions of games, just without a copy of the game, similar to what Rockstar is doing with the collector's box for Red Dead Redemption 2, a $100 box full of collectibles, but the game is not included." We were talking about this a few episodes ago. "I feel like this would be the only way to get some people such as myself to ever abandon physical copies and fully embrace the digital age. Keep up the great work. Do you think the next system will be solid state?" is basically what he is saying.
I think we're still going to have I think people are going to have a harder time parting with physical games than, although maybe not. I know I've gone completely digital. Like personally, I don't go to Best Buy and like GameStop or get my games shipped to me from Amazon. Why would I do that? You download it, just get a hard drive and you're set, I understand the reasons why you wouldn't want to do that, because then all your stuff is tied to a profile. If that profile gets hacked, God help you. But I don't know. I feel like is it weird that I feel like I'm almost too old to know whether or not that the next generation is going to be completely physically gone?
It's hard to say.
Because like, I don't know how 15-year-olds are buying their games. I'm sure they're probably downloading them.
You would have to assume
so. Would it be a big deal for them to go all digital? I don't know. Maybe not. But I can't necessarily see that happening, at least for like a little while longer.
Allow me to strike you with an anecdote.
All right.
When I did the episode of Knockback about the video stores with my and like the old video stores with my brother, I was doing research, and there's still a robust like 750 or 800 store chain of video stores that are profitable called Family Video. Most of them are in like suburban parts of the Midwest and in rural areas. And people go and they buy they rent their Blu-rays and their games and stuff like that, because sometimes they basically are playing into we don't have the bandwidth, and sometimes don't even have high-speed internet, but they're still like included, right? They can still get the new movie and the new game and stuff. And so I think that from our coastal perspective, it makes no sense to have a drive on our PS4s or our PS5s, because we download our games and I rarely get physical games, and you seem to never get physical games.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are like that, but what I fear with a solid state hardware, and why I think that companies won't do it quite yet, is because it's exclusionary, and it also is through the Western European, Japanese, and American lens, but certainly not through the Indian lens or the Brazilian lens.
That's
or
true. Yeah.
the Russian lens. These either developing economies or economies that are actually quite important in gaming, like Brazil and certain South American countries and Eastern European countries and North African countries and Middle Eastern countries that might not have the internet speeds or bandwidth or allowances that we do, still are actually pretty important to the brand. And so I think that there's still going to be an option to play physical games. But what I would like to see them do, frankly, Chris, is start discounting digital games compared to retail games.
No, absolutely. That needs to happen.
Because the way that money is split on a $60 game, and as I've said to you before, $70 games are going to be the norm next generation. But with $60 games, the way the money is split is that about, I think something like $13 or $14 goes to the retailer at a $60 game. So if you discounted a game by $10, you can actually make another $4 in profit if you're the publisher and exclude the middleman.
Yeah.
But the problem with that is that and I think we discussed this and put this in kind of visceral terms before, but the second you cut the throat of GameStop, you got to make sure Because the only thing keeping GameStop alive is Microsoft, Nintendo, and Sony playing nice with them because they need to push hardware through them. The second you're willing to stick the knife into their throat, you got to be willing to deal with the reaction of that company and the fact that they're not going to want to play nice with you anymore either, and how that might alienate and isolate people that still get their games and their products from those stores. So I think you got to kind of play a passive and kind of conservative game here.
Yeah. I think you're right that there's a coastal perspective and that we have relatively good internet. But I would argue also that like a lot of even God of War had like that patch, you know, and Spyro is gonna have this 2-game patch. So like I'm even curious as to what the state of like playing and getting new games is now for those places in the middle of the country when they have to download enormous files already. Like because I know as is, sometimes I'll download a game and then it'll have like some patch and I'm like, what is happening? This is taking forever on my internet. So, like, I don't even know how they're even managing as, you know?
It's a great point.
I don't know.
I think we're going to have to see. I wish that these companies would be more forthcoming with their data.
Yeah.
And obviously, MPD and other sales organizations track digital sales now, so it's conflating the numbers. I wish that they would break things down more, and I don't know why there's, like, a hesitance to do so. I don't know who loses there by just letting people know. You know, EA and others will talk a little bit about how like this game sold very well digitally or that people are buying more digital games. But like, what does the number look like? Is it 80-20? Is it 70-30? Is it 50-50?
Do you think it's complicated by like stolen codes and like kind of like the GOG system or whatever?
Perhaps. I think a lot of it also, Chris, has to do with the fact that like these companies just arbitrarily like keeping data to themselves as if everything has to be secret.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know why everything has to be so secret.
Yeah.
It's a little weird. Information is proprietary. I get that, but I don't know why you wouldn't just talk about it. And since this would benefit the publishers so heavily because they can cut out the middleman, like I explained, cutting $10 off the price would make them $4 more per unit of a new game, and they wouldn't have to publish it anymore. So they would literally physically make the games. They wouldn't have to ship them. They wouldn't have to deal with all of these stores anymore. They make more money doing this. So I really do think a lot of it just has to do with hardware proliferation. I really do.
Yeah.
Eric Schneider says, Colin and Chris, with Spider-Man launching from Insomniac very soon, what are the chances of a new Ratchet & Clank game in the near future, or is that a next-gen title? Lastly, what are your guys' thoughts on the series? I personally really enjoy it. Thanks for the great show. Ratchet & Clank, what's your thought?
I never really got that into it. I had the PS3 one, and I really liked it. But
a cracking time?
Yeah. Yeah, I had a good time with that one. But I don't know. I fell off of, I think like mid PS2 is when I started like falling off of playing on PlayStation primarily. I kind of like explored different systems and stuff. So I never really had a huge love for Ratchet & Clank. Not for lack of quality, just sheer lack of exposure. But they've gone back to the series before, right?
Oh, yeah. The PS4 one, which was a remake of the original from PS2, is arguably the best-selling Ratchet & Clank game of all time, including the original one.
Yeah.
And you can absolutely count on a new Ratchet & Clank game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if that game sold well, then absolutely. You can't ignore numbers.
Michael Miller says, with Days Gone releasing in the crowded month of February, what do you think are Sony's expectations for the game? Thanks for working your asses off every week to bring us the best PlayStation podcast on the web.
I appreciate it.
Chris, what are your thoughts here? What do you think the expectations are for the game?
I feel like, I'm not sure, but I know that it's an extreme. I know that it's an extreme expectation. I know that they're either expecting it. I know that they're either so confident in it that they're like, yeah, let's put it in February. We're so confident. Or, oof. You know, it cannot, I doubt it's in the middle. It's got to be one of those.
A studio survival rides on how this game does. I will say that. And I know people at Bend. I've known people at Bend for a long time. There's some good people there and a lot of good people there, but the people I know there are universally good. And I don't want them to lose their jobs or lose their studio. They work hard. Everything, their survival and their ability to make another game rides on how Days Gone does. And I think you'll see that telegraphed in the way Sony deals with getting that game out, whether or not they care that Bend survives. Because Bend, remember guys, Bend hasn't released a game since 2011. And this game's going to come out in 2019. It's very similar to Media Molecule with Dreams, which I also think I think Media Molecule is an existential in trouble. Like, no doubt about it. And I have to look at this situation as are they confident? I hope so. I think the game looks really cool, and I think the game looks really good. And obviously, they've done a great job with the games they've made, whether they've been Siphon Filter, whether they did Resistance Retribution on PSP, they did Uncharted Golden Abyss, which was a Vita launch game. That was their last game. Remember, that was their last game, a Vita launch game.
Yeah.
Now, there's a lot of rumors about the things that they've been doing since. I've talked to lots of people that have familiarity with the studio. It seems like they might have tried to port Golden Abyss to the PS3 at one time, maybe to the PS4, and some kind of false starts with other products. There was rumors that they were maybe going to make an Infamous game on Vita, but it's incumbent on this game selling, I would say, half as well at least as God of War for them to survive. And anything less than that, I would expect mass layoffs at Bend, unfortunately, and maybe the studio's closure completely. So I'm for the survival of that studio, for the survival of the talent of that studio, and for the uniqueness of Sony Bend, because they're in Oregon, they're in a weird spot.
Yeah.
And they have a lot of creativity, and they've worked really hard, and they've endeavored to make a good game. I'm really rooting for them, and really pulling for them, and pulling.
The
for my
game's
friends
set in
there.
Oregon too, right?
Yep. Actually, my buddy Jeff Ross, who I think is the director of the game, I think that's his role on this game. He took a picture out of his window at Bend, and it looked like Days Gone. And I'm like, where did you get the inspiration for Days Gone? In a tweet to him, back to him, sarcastically. It's just woods.
No, yeah. Oregon's beautiful.
It is. So I think that Sony's expectations, it's hard to say. I'm sure they're going to, the game's not nearly done yet. I'm sure they're going to mock review it in early 2019, late 2018. And then I think they will assess the situation from there. And I will be certainly very eager to see how it does. But we'll give you honest impressions of it when we go hands-on with it. And obviously when we review it, Chris and I next year, we'll have the game, I'm sure, in February. And we'll give you the honest interpretation regardless of how that affects Bend. But I hope against hope that it is a fantastic game.
Yeah.
Because even if it doesn't sell well, if it's great, they're not going to be able to shut that studio down.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Quinn Zolanko says, "Hey, Colin and Chris, love the show. Do you all ever foresee sports games adopting the games as service model? I used to be an avid fan of the NHL and NCAA football games, RIP, but I can no longer justify $60 a year for seemingly minor upgrades. I would venture to say that there are a lot of us that grew up playing sports games that have lapsed due to perceived lack of innovation, especially when I can barely keep up with the volume of new creative experiences constantly releasing in other genres. I may be willing to jump back on board, though, if we paid $20 to $30 for a yearly update with a truly new experience released every 3 to 4 years. Could it head that way someday, or are new iterations of sports games simply too profitable?" What is your take on this?
I think the fact that they put them out every year speaks to the fact that there are millions of people willing to buy it every year. So I'm not so sure that they have any reason to innovate at all. What you're suggesting is incredibly wise, I think, from a sheer just from a consumer standpoint, because I think I think sports games are a giant ripoff, honestly, and I haven't seen anything to convince me otherwise in the last like what feels like 20 years. But I think they're just selling so well that I'm not so confident that you would see that change.
You're absolutely right. People have to look at sports games this way. Sports games, yearly annualized sports games, are incubated and made in about 10 months.
Yeah.
And whether this is MLB The Show, whether this is NHL, Madden, whatever the case might be, it's about a 10th-month period, because when a game launches, from my experience talking to people that work at these studios, you get about a month after the game comes out to kind of chill, and a month before the game comes out is kind of patching and kind of preparing and also chilling, and the other 10 months are horrifying in terms of the development of these games and how they turn them around. And they're not able to iterate. See, it's a catch-22, Chris, because they're not able to iterate because they don't have the time. So like they have to implement one thing. We're going to do this year. We're going to do this next year. They don't have the 3 or 4 year cycle to be like, we can shove everything we want into this game.
Right.
And that's a huge problem. But because the games, like we were talking about Days Gone with an incubation period of many years, Dreams with an incubation period of many years, AAA games, 3, 4, 5 year incubation period, and they sell sometimes much more poorly than a $60 version of Madden will every year. So there's a massive profit margin. And EA, specifically, and Sony to a lesser degree with MLB, need to be able to be willing to eat shit for future profitability and the brand's kind of recognizability and the feeling of the good feelings that a player might have for Madden, for instance, over time. Because I'm totally with them. I used to play Madden every year and NHL every year, but I would never buy Madden or NHL anymore. I used to get them for free. That's why I'd play them.
And look, I don't really play sports games at all. They've never interested me. I think I had like MLB The Show back in the day, but I have to assume that microtransactions have weaseled their way in there somehow, right?
Oh yeah, they have.
I'm sure they have.
With FIFA, especially, EA said
right.
that I think they make like tens of millions or dollars.
So you got to consider that also. Not only do you have a game that sells like a bunch every year, you also have microtransactions for that specific game that then have a yearly renewed, fresh group of people to buy them. You know, because like if you buy a microtransaction for like a game that came out in 2016. 2017 comes out, and there's a new baseball game coming out. Now nobody owns those microtransactions. That's a whole new market to blow out from. So you have this kind of like initial success with constant profitability, and then you have the same thing the next year, and the same thing the next year.
Sure.
So I don't know if you, I don't know. You're really optimistic if you expect to change.
It's going to be tough to break the cycle. The only way to break it is for people in mass, in unison, to stop buying these games and kind of demand better. So Chris is absolutely right. And the only thing that I'd add on top of it is that you don't have to buy these games. And that's obvious, like at face value. But what I mean by that is like roster updates and stuff like that are latent. I'm sure MLB The Show 14 is still getting roster updates. Like if that's all you're worried about. Back in the day, we used to have to, dude, I remember playing NHL in 95, 96, 97 on SNES and later on PS1, 98, 99, where I would go through like the transactions in a newspaper and be like, this guy just got signed here, this guy just got traded here, and literally go in and change that all myself.
That's insane.
And you don't have to do that anymore, right? So there's a way for you to play the old games, which is just to play the old games. And even if you're worried about the inclusion of new players, or whatever, they'll import those for old versions. So there is a more consumer friendly aspect to it than I think people give credit for. But again, here's what you're going to find in the fall and going into 2019 on the MPD top 10. NBA 2K and Madden, and they're going to be on that top 10 list for months and months and months, and they took 10 months to make, and they're going to be alongside games like Red Dead Redemption that took 5, 6, 7 years to make, and you wonder where the profit margins come from. EA is making boatloads of money on these games, boatloads.
Yeah.
Tyson Williams says, the hype for Smash Ultimate is real. Is it time for PlayStation to give another shot at PlayStation Battle Royale? Do you think they would give it another shot? What would you want out of another PSBR game? Characters, maps, mechanics? Do you think PlayStation Battle Royale could live again, or something similar, a PlayStation-centric Smash-like fighter?
I thought that game was terrible.
Did you? I liked it. I thought it was good.
But I also...
It's a good first attempt.
It wasn't a bad first attempt, but also I'm not the biggest Smash fan either. So I might be like completely wrong here, but something about that, I think it was just... Smash Brothers works very well because its characters are so varied. You have a lot of weird, like, hey, here's Mario. Is that a human being? Possibly. And then you have him alongside Kirby and all these weird characters. With PlayStation Battle Royale, I felt like it was just a bunch of guys, like Cole and Nathan Drake. And I'm like, what is this? Something about this feels really weird.
Yeah, it was
a bit awkward. I think they should experiment with an idea like that. I would hope that they don't just copy Smash, because we already have Smash.
Well, I remember when the game started to get leaked, and I was talking to people behind the scenes, and it was very nebulous for my sources what it was, and these high-res images of like Sweet Tooth and a couple others I think were released, and I was like, oh, they're making a 2D fighter, which I thought was like a 2D like Street Fighter-like game. Yeah. And obviously, as people know, the game was made by Superbot Entertainment in Santa Monica, which does not exist anymore. And they instead aped Smash Brothers completely, but didn't do it very well. Yeah. And I actually thought it was a pretty great game on a base level, because it was just their first attempt. If you go back and play N64 Smash Brothers, it is a far cry from what Smash Brothers is today. So I was like, this is a nice foundation. And the other thing is that it sold very well. It sold like 1.5 million copies, I think. So it wasn't like this total loss. And it was on Vita and PS3, so it was compromised a little bit technically. But I feel like that is a dead end for the PlayStation brand. I don't think that... Would I like to see that? Of course I'd like to see something like that again. But that seemed to be an investment that did not make Sony money, and that caused them actually a great deal of PR ridicule, because people were just accusing them of straight up copying Smash. And so if you're going to do that, if you're going to bring it, you got to bring it. Yeah, no, exactly. And otherwise you just got to not bother. So if they were going to make a fighting game, I would love for them to employ Capcom or Arc System Works or something to do it for them. Otherwise, I think you got to stay away and let Nintendo dominate that, because that's what they do.
Yeah. No, I think that's pretty accurate.
Jimmy Champagne says, hey guys, love the show. I'd love to hear your thoughts on why people don't turn up to buy Bethesda's games, Fallout and Elder Scrolls excluded. I played Dishonored 2, Prey, and Wolfenstein the New Colossus last year, and they were all great single-player experiences, which is what the gaming community seems to be begging for, but none of them sold exceptionally well. And he says, P.S. Colin, have you been to Frito Misto in Santa Monica? It's my favorite Italian place in the area. Frito Misto is right in my neighborhood, and you may find me there on occasion. It is very good. Great homemade pasta. What are your thoughts on this? We've talked a great deal about Bethesda. I kind of dispute the fact that these games aren't selling well. I just don't think that they're doing the Bethesda Game Studios numbers.
Yeah.
And Doom, by the way, you left out here, Doom sold extraordinarily well too.
Yeah. No, exactly. And yeah, I mean, Dishonored 2, I think sold pretty well too.
They also
Wolfenstein definitely, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I understand what he's saying, where the numbers are tempered based on how these marquee titles do, but that's not really a fair way to look at it. It's like asking why. Well, we were talking about Days Gone. Like, why isn't Days Gone going to do with The Last of Us numbers? Well, it's because it's not the fucking Last of Us. You know,
no, exactly.
So I understand what you're saying, Jimmy, but I think that you have to kind of look at it. If these games were really bombing, these studios would not exist anymore. I think everything's doing well. I think, were the sales probably softer than they wanted for these games? Sure. But people, it's like we said with the Capcom story earlier. They're getting critical reception that's pretty positive, a lot of nice buzz, and they're building a family of trustworthy studios that you want to buy their games from without even having to see anything. And I think that's going to play longer term for them than immediate sales. David S. Graham says, will the Vita library be impossible to properly replicate in the future? I ask this as with the production of Vita cartridges ceasing on the horizon. Sad news, but it's true. I considered how the unique and quite likely superfluous inputs of the Vita might very well make it far more difficult relative to other PlayStation devices for its games to ever be playable on future hardware. Backtouch and front touch aren't really translatable to a controller. PSTV proves this. And games like the Tearaway port on PS4 prove that some titles require significant reworking in order just to be playable, and in this case, generally inferior. There's not much stopping all other PlayStation devices' libraries to be put on the up for download in the future, but the fact that the Vita library may largely be relegated to battery-dependent, ultimately perishable, and unfortunately obscure devices is of the utmost disconcerting. Perhaps it's all completely unfounded fears. Just thought it was interesting to think it in a more preservationist perspective. This is a great point. What do you make of that, Chris?
I don't know. I have very little experience with the Vita, honestly. But
I
hadn't thought about the how specific that device is, especially with like the back touch. I totally forgot that was even a thing on the Vita. So I mean, that's fair. There is a reasonable concern there, especially if games were like very, very, very dependent on how that, like the control scheme of that hardware. I could see that being an issue. Yeah.
I think it's a legitimate worry. I think we talked about this on a previous episode. I was worried about Vita back in the day not being able to be iterated on with newer, cheaper versions of it because of all these things that a few games require. So like they couldn't make a cheaper Vita in 2013 and say like, we're making this thing $99.99. We're removing the back touch. We're removing the cameras. We're removing the gyros. It's just going to be a game machine with a front touch screen, which I think is totally necessary and fine. But they're not able to do that. And I never really thought about it from a software perspective. Like he said, Tearaway, which Media Molecule made and released on Vita originally and then ported it to PS4, needed to be greatly reworked. And games like even Golden Abyss, the Uncharted game, which is a mainline Uncharted game, and technically is always going to be stranded on that hardware because of that game even needs the camera for light sources and shit like that on certain puzzles. So there's a lot of cute shit that they thought they were doing that ended up kind of alienating gamers and then isolating these games on the platform, and it is a problem. We'll see what they do with it. I don't know. It's a great point.
Yeah, I don't know.
Chris, we have 3 more questions.
Okay.
John Lynch says, love the show, guys. I'd like to start off by saying, if nobody else, I'm excited for the new Tomb Raider. My question is for Colin. Do you think Square Enix is sending Dragon Quest off to die? Outside of fans who would buy regardless, I feel like it's being released at a tough time of the year and without much marketing push. It's a shame after seeing the series catch some limelight over here with DQ Builders and the Warriors series. I don't know. I don't know that there isn't a Dragon Quest game that ever sold exceptionally well. Now, he's right that the Dragon Quest Builders game on Vita, PS4, and other platforms did do well, and I think they're releasing a sequel. And that they did the Dragon Quest Heroes game, which is basically a Musou-style game. For people that don't know what a Musou is, that's like Dynasty Warriors, kind of like whatever, kind of like a bunch of enemies at once, very simple, very, very button mashy, very Omega Force, as it were. Omega Force is the studio that makes all those games.
I didn't even know there was a term for that.
Yeah, Musou, Musou. And so, yeah, they did get some shine and some buzz from that. And I think that it's going to translate silently to Dragon Quest XI. You said that people are going to buy it regardless that are into it. I think that's what they're relying on. You're not going to see a Dragon Quest XI commercial during football. It doesn't make sense. It's a traditional, very niche role-playing series, and I'm just glad they're bringing it over here at all. And obviously, we've gotten every Dragon Quest game ultimately except for 10 in the West, which was an MMO. But I'm not bullish about its sales figures, but I'm I'm confident that it's going to meet their expectations, whatever it is. Dragon Quest 11 is probably good for 300,000-400,000 copies, and I think that they're probably fine with that because the game sold exceptionally well in Japan, which is its primary market for the game, and all they needed to do was localize it. So, it's not like they were investing tens of millions of dollars in getting it here. It's probably just money on top for them. And I think they're perfectly comfortable with that. Mo Howdy, I think I'm saying your name right, says, with the much anticipated Western release of Dragon Quest XI on PS4 and PC approaching, I have a few questions, mainly for the JRPG nerd, Colin, regarding the series as a whole. I've heard you talk about Dragon Quest before, but not in depth. So I'd like to know more. First, how do you think the Dragon Quest series stacks up against some of the other popular series in the genre? So I'll answer that question first. It's very traditional and very old school, turn-based. It's not about story. It's not about glamour and glitz. It comes from an era where grinding was fun, and I still think grinding is fun, where you were just trying to advance to the next section and see the end of the game. It's really all about that. If you're looking for a role-playing game with story and like an emphasis on environment and all that kind of stuff, Dragon Quest is not going to be for you. What do you think are its strengths and weaknesses compared to those other series, and how, if at all, do you think that it will play into the its relative unpopularity in the West? Just explained it. Although I will remind you guys that on the NES, we got 4 Dragon Quest games in 5 years, and they were very popular in the West. It's just that the genre in the 16-bit era moved on. And when you put up Final Fantasy 3, for instance, 6 against Dragon Quest 4, 2 very different games. And then he finally says, I'd also love to hear which games you think are the best and worst entries and why. I personally consider Dragon Quest 7 to not only be the best Dragon Quest game, but also the best JRPG of all time. Unpopular opinion, I know. Thanks for all the hard work you guys put into creating awesome content. I love the show, and I'm rooting for your continued success.
Hey, appreciate that, guy.
Thank you so much, Mo. Dragon Quest 7 is obviously a favorite. Dragon Quest 7, for people that don't know, is a late PS1 release. It is an extraordinarily long game. It's about 150 hour game.
Jesus.
And it is incredibly traditional. And a lot of people really like it. A lot of people also point at 8, which is a PS2 game, as being one of their favorites. I personally love the first one on NES because it's very nostalgic for me, and the fourth one on NES. That's when we used to call the series in the West Dragon Warrior, because there was some trademark and IP conflict in calling it Dragon Quest. But starting with Dragon Quest 8, they were able to call it Dragon Quest here, and all that changed. So very excited about it. Hopefully we'll be playing it this week, and I will let you guys know more. Final question, Chris, comes from Andy Donahue. Says, hi guys, Colin, always have loved your passion for games. Chris, I'm getting to know you and loving your input and knowledge.
Thank you, man.
So happy to have a PlayStation-centric podcast to listen to again without the BS. Anyway, my point and question. Over my 30 years of playing video games, I have found myself constantly moving from genre to genre every few years. When I was young, I loved every type of game. The first time I played a video game was Lemmings on my cousin's Amiga around 1987-ish. From there, I fell in and out of genres, from platformers to racing games to beat-em-ups to FPS shooters. Lately, I'm loving survival games, e.g. Minecraft, No Man's Sky, and 7 Days to Die, although Buggy, a hugely underrated game. My question is, have ye had the same experience of falling in and out of genres? And if so, what is your favorite type?
No, absolutely. Jesus.
What is your answer for that?
Oh my God, I used to do a lot of I used to be really into Command and Conquer Red Alert and stuff like that. I kinda,
strategy?
Yeah, I used to do a lot of strategy, and then I got into like sim stuff, like racing sim, like flight sims, and then I kind of gravitated more towards like fighting, like pretty much 2001 to 2007 were just like fighting and FPSs, and then it branched out to like RPGs and stuff. But I'm a sucker for a good FPS. FPS to me is like just like especially Doom came out and it was just like, this is great. This is exactly what I've been wanting for years. Just like, hey, you start the game and it's just a spree until it's over. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And I feel like that's been I've delved a little bit more into RPG stuff lately. JRPGs I never got into. I could never do that. I could never do JRPGs and like sports. I just could, like, my brain is just not wired in that way.
It's probably for the best, honestly. Yeah, I think that what my experience starting games in the late 80s and moving into today was I am attracted to something and I kind of take it with me.
Yeah.
So side scrollers, obviously in the NES era, and then
absolutely.
in the 16-bit and 32-bit eras, I was all about Japanese role-playing games and sports games, and I kind of took those with me. And then in the PS2 and PS3 era, I was getting more into third-person action and all of that. And really, the most recent genre that I picked up that I absolutely adore is shooters. Like, I didn't start playing FPS regularly until like 10 years ago. Mm. And I really love that genre a great deal. It was really started with BioShock and everything that kind of convinced me that even though that's not really a shooter per se, that perspective was quite appealing to me. But it's not that anything's fallen by the wayside. It's that everything is mixed up so much for me as an adult that I play a little bit of everything, but not quite as deep as I used to in any one genre.
Yeah, I would say that's accurate. I think, yeah.
Yeah,
it's hard to put a lot of your time into everything, especially when you're not a kid anymore. And like when you're a kid, you just like you pretty much have one game every so often.
Right.
Oh, yay, it's Christmas. I got a game. And then you just sank every minute that you could possibly sink into that game, and you'd play that game to death. But it's not really like that anymore. Now there's games.
Yeah, there's something I want to play constantly, and that's what makes these glut of games that we kind of make fun of or read about anyway on our list every week here on Sacred Symbols is like these games are all accompanying the big games. Like I don't even know who's playing some of this shit.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to insult it necessarily or insult the people that play it, but like who is playing some of these games when you have all these big marquee games and even big indie games and exciting games to play? There's more selection than ever. So yeah, like I am super partial to role-playing games. I'm super partial to shooters, and it's easier for me to tell you like what I don't play. Like I don't like, occasionally play a rhythm game or a dance game, but I'm not really into that. I don't play sports games anymore, pretty much at all, and that's pretty much it. Other than that, I'm pretty much open to everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, that's it for our episode of Sacred Symbols.
Yeah, it is. I gotta go on a plane now.
You gonna fly in an airplane?
I'm not looking forward to this.
To JFK?
Yeah, LAX to JFK. It's a fun trip.
Yeah, it'll be quicker there on the way back. That's the shitty thing about when we used to live on the East Coast and you'd come to California and then you knew it would be quicker going home. But now that flight just drags. But we're wishing you the best. I'm glad we were able to accommodate you this week. And remember, everyone, we're recording this just a day early. So if we missed any news, like something that broke crazy on Monday before this episode goes live for patrons on Tuesday, we do apologize about that.
Yeah. I'll be here next Monday.
Yeah, we're going to have a good time next Monday. And in the meantime, I wish you the very best in New York. Hope that you get all your, see your family, have a nice time, and get some nice footage for your videos.
I'm planning on it.
Yeah. And for everyone out there, appreciate your love and support of Sacred Symbols. Remember, support us on Patreon at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. You can get every episode of the show 3 days early with no ads. And a lot of the cool kids are doing it. I don't want to say all of the cool kids are doing it, but certainly many of the cool kids are doing it. Bye. Sacred Symbols, a PlayStation podcast, is fan-supported over at patreon.com/ColinsLastStand. The following names are at the producer level or higher on Patreon, and I want to thank you from the very bottom of my heart for your incredible kindness and generosity. Ahmed Alloways, Martin Beck, Fred Bentz, Michael Betts, David Blodel, Mark Boggio, Spencer Brand, Isaac Brewer, Lennon Brixey, Matthew Brousseau, Josh Bushing, Austin Bullock, Andrew Burkhart, Alex Cabrera, William Caldwell, Luis Cancato, Matthew Canoy, William O'Carroll, Shermer Carter, William Cashel, Brian Chand, Travis Chandler, Sean Chandler, Kenneth Charr, David Chestnut, Steve Clifford, Dan Clifford, Chris Cochran, Simon Conception Jr., Brad Cooley, Nick Cummings, Daniel Diamore, Daniel Delanikos, Travis Depew, Mitchell Durkash, David Ellis, Albert Escobar, Brian Fink, Joe Finelli, Eric Fickenbeiner, Connor Gashian, Alexander Gates, Michael Gates, Daniel Glassford, Nick Goblersh, Tyler Goodwin, David S. Graham, Josh Gravelick, Ryan Greenwood, Miranda Grubba, Nick Gustafson, Andres Guzman, Tyler Harris, Wyatt Henry, Josh Yeager, Clarence Johnson, Paul Joyce, Greg Juliffs, Jeremy Key, Kevin Komaki, Taylor C. Laudrin, Jackson Lastuka, Donald Laws, Joe Lawson, Don Q. Lee, Patrick Leslie, Dustin Lewis, Keith A. Lewis, Chad Lewis, Mark Liberto, Lou and Ray Loper, Josh M., Ryan T. Mandel, John McManus, Joe McPartlin, Albert Miranda, Patrick Malloy, Betty Ann Moriarty, Abe Mukhtar, Brian Neach, Connor Nesbitt, Josh Netzel, Adam Nix, Brian Ott, Jorge Palomino, Reed K. Parker, Todd Paxton, Brendan Peavy, Marius S. Peterson, Enrique Perez, Eric A. Peterson, Jason Pettit, Lawrence F. Prokop, Eric R. Pryor, Brandon Reed, Michael Renner, Peter Reynolds, Shane Rayum, Jonathan Rice, Austin Riley, Ramon Rodriguez Jr., Petro Rose, Michael Sanchez, Matthew Savoy, John Scholes, Chris Schaefer, Toby Shootman, Gurman Sidhu, Riley Smith, Jared Stwave, Alexander Suarez, Steven Summingat, Ahmad Tamar, Tam Tran, Esteban Valentin, Oakley Waldron, Justin Wagaman, Tyler Woodall, Corey Wyatt, Tony Zuniga, Casual Misfits Gaming, Supershot ST, Mad Mock Media, Beric, Mubarak, Dav9834, Chris, and Donk 2015.